I'm conducting an inquiry into the events surrounding the death of Sergeant Waters. The report I file will be confidential. What will the Army say when they find out 2 white officers beat up the murder victim not long before he was shot to death?
You've got a motive, you've got a witness. What more do you want?
This is still my investigation, Charlie.
You killed Waters, didn't you? Answer me! Did you kill Waters?
Captain Richard Davenport has come to Fort Neal to find out the truth about a man's past.
What kind of man was he?
I'm the kind of colored man that don't like lazy, shiftless Negroes.
His enemies.
Waited a long time for you, boy. But I got you.
And his murder.
Keep turning this thing over, you bound to have an explosion.
Now, you hit him, didn't you?
I knocked him down.
They're all lying.
Prove it.
Then you shot him.
He was alive when we left.
Who gave you the right to judge?
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Wars. Prepare for Prattle.
Secret Stories. Welcome to Prattle World. I am your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan, and in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to Secret Bore Stories, where I invite guests to count down a personal top 5 list in high-fidelity fashion. And it's been a little while since me and my guest have been together on our own. We've cast aside our mutual friends or partners to go, and we're just having a lads holiday. This is our little lads holiday together, and we're going to be talking about Mike Burton's Patreon choice. So my patrons, but Mike has his own patrons doing their own thing, have decided that instead of post-apocalyptic movies, I think we were going to do our top 5. They have decided we are going to look at top 5 movies with a minimal cast. So welcome back, Mike. It's been a little while since we've been on this channel, and again, alone, just you and me. Not weird, not in a weird way. Just
bros to the end.
Yeah, bros to the end.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw you was actually at my wedding party. So last time I saw you, I think it was in person. Was Tron?
I think Tron may have been after, actually. Maybe.
Yeah, it was pretty close. But yeah, it was either when I saw you then or Tron for Disney discussions. But yes, obviously shout out Disney discussions because that's how we regularly interact. But it's always a good year, always a good month when I come on to Spider-Man's lovely pod.
Yeah, and this year, Mike, your podcast that we did last has become my most popular podcast. It's beaten Jack. Jack, my biggest fan, has been knocked off the board, and you have taken the top spot with our Venom and Carnage podcast. I recently saw Venom 3. Have you seen it yet?
No, I want to go to the cinema, but I've not been to the cinema in ages, and I've heard I want to see Joker 2, which I haven't. I want to see Venom 3, which I haven't. I want to see Speak No Evil, which I haven't, and I want to see Heretic, which I haven't. And obviously the latter two are held in very high regard. The former two are not.
Not so much.
So I'm going to be waiting for those to come out on home release or streaming, really, and then just kind of I'll buy Venom 3 on Blu-ray just because I've got the other two, I am a fan of the first 2 Venom movies, even though I concede that they're not that great. But I do enjoy them. I'm actually wearing a Spider-Man Venom and Carnage top.
Oh, Mark Bagley.
Commemorate it.
Yeah. I think we talked about Mark Bagley before in his artwork. Yes. Well, even the man who supports the Sony films, Max Byrne, came out of that film and was not pleased. And we went to see Morbius together, and he liked Morbius.
See, I haven't seen Morbius yet.
Morbius is okay. It's on the I think it's on the same kind of level as the first Venom. I think it's kind of that mid 2000s type superhero.
The first Venom. That doesn't sound too bad because I like that film.
I mean, it's lower than the first Venom for me. I mean, we talked about Let There Be Carnage quite extensively on that podcast. Yeah. But yes, it's fine. It's fine. Morbius is fine. That is it. It's fine. It's not the worst film you've ever seen. It's not the worst directed, written, or performed film you've ever seen or shot film. It's just fine. It was bleh, basically. Venom 3 for me, dreadful. Okay. But I'll leave my Letterboxd review in the show notes, along with a link to Disney discussions as well. But Mike, we're not here to talk about those things and your popularity. We are here to talk movies with minimal casts. Yes. So, Mike, why out of those two topics that the patrons picked, they chose this one over that, but why did you want to do films that have a minimal cast?
Well, I basically came to what I do selfishly when I come on your show is normally I just go, I just really want to talk about these films. And that's kind of what I did. I was just like, I want to talk about two specific films that are in my top 5 that are two of my favorite films. And then I was just like, how would I do this? And I was like, wait a minute, both of these films only have like 2 or 3 people in. And then I was like, you know what, actually, I'm a real sucker for two things. And one of them is one-shots, although I've not seen 1917 or Birdman, which are probably the two biggest one-shot things in the last decade. So I'm a hypocrite in that regard. But I love a one-shot scene. You know, Daredevil's famous for them. The Raid has got some incredible ones.
Like a wanna, like a big wanna.
One, like the camera doesn't cut, it just keeps going. And you get great, I think a lot of Eastern films have a tendency to do that a lot more. Yeah, I think Old Boy has a phenomenal one shot when he's down the hallway. I can't remember if it's actually one shot, but it's an incredible scene when he's breaking out the prison with the hammer. And I'm like, I really like those. And I realized I like small cast films, because those kind of films, I think it's really difficult to make a compelling story with not many people. And you have to have a very good idea, a very good script, and really know what you're doing from a directorial standpoint. And so there were two films I definitely wanted to do. There's a third one, which I was like, I haven't seen this in ages. I remember really enjoying it. And I basically was convinced Megan to watch it around sort of spooky season. And then I was like, you know what, that would actually really work. So, and there's a handful of films, some that were made the list, some that would go on the honorable mentions, of films I either wanted to rewatch or that I've heard good things about, and I wanted to watch them. And I just think that when you have a small cast movie, they're quite high concept. And it sounds like a bit of a dickhead right now. As someone who really enjoys films,
no change there, Mike.
I'm not. Thank you. I'm not going to call myself a cinephile. A, because I've never called myself that, but B, because I'm hyper conscious now because of Jack and.
Yeah, he doesn't like that name. Doesn't like that word.
Was it you and Jack on the?
I think it was on our.
Where you spoke about that.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh God, it sounds really wanky," and I was like,
"Yeah," and I was like, I never said anyway, but I'm not going to say it now. But basically, because of being a film fan, Megan likes movies, and we all love Megan. But she's not a film buff. She's not a film fan.
No, I'd agree.
Enjoys films. And if you said to her, Megan, you can never watch a new film ever again, she'd be like, I'm fine with the films I've seen up to this point. Yes. If you told me I can't watch a film again, I'd have a fucking meltdown. So, it's one of those. And I think that when most of us who call ourselves film buffs or stuff, you and I especially haven't seen a handful of giant, big, massive films that everyone always goes on about. You really like films? Oh, really? Why haven't you seen this? I've seen like 50 films you've never heard of, ever. And a lot of people, when certain VHS strikes back, come up,
everyone needs to see Visitor Q. Just listen to Megan's reaction. Actually,
it's a rite of passage. She still hasn't forgiven me for that. She genuinely is still angry.
I kind of understand though. I kind of get it.
To a degree, I did warn her a lot. I did say
I was like, "Are you sure you want to watch Megan to watch this?" You're like, "No, she's got to see it. She's definitely got to see it." I was like,
she agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed myself. She did not. She did.
Yeah, it's not a good film. It's a good experience. It's not a good film. That's in my opinion. Yeah, so it was really just an excuse for me to watch a handful of films that either I hadn't seen or I wanted to rewatch. And so the good thing is as well that I've noticed that's quite a common thread is most, not all, most small cast films are quite short.
Yes.
So most of the ones I watched were under 100 minutes. And in fact, I think of your picks, there's only one or two that exceed even 100 minutes. So that's also a good thing where it's like when Megan was like, look, I'm not going to watch all these films. I know you need to. And I wanted to watch some of your films. There was like a handful of films that I wanted to watch that were kind of vying for my sort of 5th spot. And so I was like, I can't force Megan to watch all of these. So it was quite nice to be able to like have an hour and a half to myself, which after Megan goes to bed, that's a reasonable enough time. Like I can watch a film in an hour and a half and that's manageable. You can't watch like a 3-hour epic. I just don't have the time for that. So it was a combination of things. I mean, at some point in the future, I'm sure if patrons allow, that we will do the post-apocalyptic thing, because I love the thing is I love sci-fi, as everyone knows. Well, funnily enough, although I love Star Wars, I don't love shiny sci-fi. I love dirty sci-fi. And I think the perfect encapsulation of that is District 9. And so that's a real great one. And then there's other films
covered on this podcast, link below in the show notes.
Yes, exactly. See,
got to plug everything, Mike. We've got to plug everything.
Well, I just come on here and just basically make you watch all the films I really want to watch. That's basically the excuse.
Hey, I'm open to it. You know me, I will watch anything. Unlike Megan, I will watch anything.
I know, but what did you think? Like when I kind of pitched this and the post-apocalyptic one, did you have a preference, and what did you think of this?
I think, because I do kind of, I make like lists and lists of stuff, like ideas for podcasts and stuff, and I think it was in there.
Quite a lot, don't you?
Yeah, I've got a big letterbox list, and I did a short list of this, which again I'll include in the show notes. But yeah, I think the idea was there, because I think it was kind of niche enough. So I was kind of like, yeah, I think this is interesting. I like. For like me, I like bottle movies. I like films that are like set, or plays that are set in like one location and no one can leave for some reason, and you just see it all kind of go like starts off pretty nice, like 12 Angry Men, you know, things. I was
thinking
like
12 Angry Men.
Yeah, kind of the whole like you can't really escape this one location, or The Thing is a little bit like that as well. A few other films, but the idea that you're stuck in this one location, you're all just slowly unraveling. I quite like that aspect of films. So again, I like ones that have, you know, short run times like yourself. I'm you know, ADHD myself, so I'm like, I can do long films, I can do them, but it has to really grab me as well for me to be really invested and involved. Like Gladiator, I watched with Andy, I loved. I was on board for the entire thing, and yeah, no, I thought it's a good topic, because it's kind of not one I don't think a lot of people might go out and go, oh yeah, I've never really thought about how many people are in this.
Yeah.
And with this, the reason I'm saying like a minimal cast is I didn't really want to put a number on it. I didn't want it to go like, oh, it's got one person in it or two, because that's going to be quite difficult for us to like specifically find stuff. So and there are some of these films do have more than the main players, but we've gone for kind of the minimal main cast, you know, a short amount of people, like a play, or like, you know, just a real minimal amount. But again, not a specific number or anything. We just say it's a relatively small number of people within this film. But yeah, I like films that, you know, can focus on one character. I think you have to have a really strong actor, like you said, a really strong script, a really strong idea, the story you want to tell. What do you want to do with that time? And again, because of usually I remember like Evil Dead, they were talking about making Evil Dead 2, and they're like, we just want it to be Bruce Campbell in the woods on his own. And they're like, you can't do that. You need other characters. It's like, no, we want to just, you know, he's just going mad and, you know, he's talking to all the animals, like the deer head and everything, and the zombies under the floorboards. And they were like, you can't do that. And like, oh, fine, we'll put in some other characters that can get killed, you know. So there is like a legitimate thing that it's kind of a lot of people trying to avoid. But I think due to kind of budget requirements as well, like, you know, big movies don't, you know, you've got to have a lot of people, and there's a lot of kind of, you know, I used Oppenheimer as an example for basically the listener comments. I was like, Oppenheimer would not be in this list because it's got a fucking massive cast of people.
And one of the films I originally was going to choose, I've actually stepped away from that because of a vibe, really, which I'll talk about when I get to number 5. But
I told you about one I removed, which I'll go into reasons.
Yeah, there was one I had considered, and then I decided not to rewatch it, even though I love the film, but it's been tainted.
Yes.
But we will,
I rewatched the one I wanted to rewatch because I loved this a while ago, and I want to do this one. And then I learned things about the actor that is in it. But we'll get into that. But Mike, time has come for us to talk. You know, we're both small people, small podcasters in a big pond. So let's begin with your number one. What is the first film that features a minimal cast?
Just out of interest, I know generally you don't do it in orders, it's just kind of 5.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have, with the 5 that you've chosen, do you have a loose tier list, or are you just going to do random?
No, I think I've just got a 5. I think they're all good in their own way. I don't think any of them are particularly better than the other. They're just different and quite varied. But it's up to you if you want to list it in a descending or ascending order.
So I'll mix it up a little bit. So I don't generally like ranking films very much. I've got like a top 10 list of my favorites, but it's very hard because I'm like, well, Revenge of the Sith is my comfort film, but Trainspotting is my favorite film ever, and it's like, but Social Network, I think, is a phenomenal movie. I think it's David Fincher's best, potentially controversially. So it's like, it depends on my vibe, and two of these films are in there. So what I'll do is the two films are two of my absolute favorite films ever. One's in my top 3 and one's in my top 10. I will hold on to them towards the end, but the other 3 are kind of fluid. So what I'll do is my third pick, I'm going to choose that a bit later, and because that one was between 3 movies which have weirdly got connections to them. So I'm sure the Clone Wars fans of you will love that, but I'm not going to start with that. So although that would technically be number 5 in my list, I'm actually going to kind of start with my number 4, even though this is confusing to everyone, so I'm just going to say it. So I'm choosing Before Sunrise. I remember this film because I saw it for the first time a few weeks back when I watched it for this pod, and I remember, so my older brother Rob, who was on my podcast many moons ago talking about my dad and stuff, he always had a giant DVD collection, as I have quite a large one now, nowhere near as big as his. But I remember I used to sit in his lounge and we used to watch movies and stuff with my sister-in-law and etc. And I remember always looking up and he had them in alphabetical order. And I always remember seeing Before Sunrise and Before Sunset. And I remember looking at the spines of those DVDs, looking at them and go, they look so dull. Like compared to all the crazy stuff, you've got Brain Dead over here and you've got like really an Evil Dead and all these crazy weird films. And then you've got Before Sunrise, it's the DVD spine is literally just some clouds and the font is like the most generic, I think it's like Times New Roman or something, just written Before Sunrise. And I was like, that looks shit. And this is when I was like, 10 or 12 or whatever. And so I've always vaguely known of its existence. And then Tony and I have spoken about the Before trilogy several times, Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight. And so with Tony speaking about them quite a bit, and I was like, this is going to be an easy film to get Megan to watch. She wasn't overly a fan, but I've got an afterthoughts on my Patreon, which will be out in the coming weeks to talk about why. But essentially, it's a film that I just heard a lot about. And in premise, it's literally just, careful if you watch it on Amazon Prime, because the description, which is about 12 words, literally spoils the film, which aggravates me. And also, don't go on Disney Plus and look at film descriptions, because if you look at Revenge of the Sith and you look at the description on Disney Plus, it says, it's literally something like, Anakin Skywalker goes bad, destroys the Jedi Order, and fights Obi-Wan in the final confrontation. And you're like, that happened in the last half an hour of the film. The whole film is a build-up to that. If you've never seen the film before, you've just spoiled the whole plot. And they kind of do that in Before Sunrise, so I won't repeat that. But essentially 2 people who are traveling for one reason or another, they get talking on a train, and then they basically agree to just hang out until they have to go. And so they've basically got a handful of hours. I think it's indicated like 5, 6, maybe 10. And they just walk around Vienna. They're both English speaking. They walk around Vienna and they just kind of get to know each other. And it's a film it's got a fair amount of quotable dialogue. It feels quite coming of age. It's directed by Richard Linklater, who made this trilogy. He made Boyhood, which I've been meaning to watch for ages, which also has Ethan Hawke in it, which is filmed over like 12 years. And when I heard about that, I was really intrigued. But he also made Dazed and Confused, linked back to filmography, and he also made School of Rock, which is one of Megan's favorite films. So it is a film where the 2 characters who are in their early 20s and you're kind of seeing them figure themselves out in a way. I really like what it does, because it's a very human story where nothing really happens. Like, even knowing what the crappy description is, it doesn't really affect you going into it. You kind of know that's going to happen. You look at 2 people who are heterosexual, opposite gendered people who are clearly single on a train meeting away. What do you think's going to happen in a movie? I found it was very charming, and I found that it was very human. And I think that what's a common theme across my choices is the human condition. And I think that's probably why I like these kind of films, but I also love sci-fi, because, a lot of sci-fi, especially the writing, is really just the story in the setting of especially post-apocalyptics, post-apocalyptic films, which obviously was our other potential choice. Those are designed specifically to strip back everything aside from humans and see what do humans do under extreme duress. And to be honest, that's what horror films do to a degree. A lot of films are trying to show the human condition, but with certain pressures put on them. And I think this is really just almost kind of like, what do 2 people act like when there's no baggage of who they are, there's no friends, there's no peer pressure, there's no outside involvement. It's just 2 people just kind of existing for a bit with no stress or pressure as to what this interaction will lead to. And I really like that because, you know, I'm not religious. I don't necessarily believe in fate or things like that. But I do believe that there are some very interesting and happy coincidences that happen, and that a huge amount of the most important things that happen in your life start off by being something completely innocuous. And it's just a, you know, chain of events. You know, Tonya and Tony and I spoke about it, where like Comics Lit was, they credited me for this to some degree, and I want to try and push that credit away. But they were like, you know,
I did it
Lit,
all. I did it all. It was all me.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't even contribute to the first volume. But Tony and Tonya basically said, well, because Tonya met the I thought ladies, and then she met her agent, and then her agent got in touch with me about you know, connecting on my podcast and things, and then that made me meet Tonya, and then we hit it off, and then did another podcast where we didn't talk about our acting and just talk about loads of nerdy stuff. Tony listened, connected with her, blah blah blah, and so it was just the thing where she just, either because she interacted with the And I Thought ladies, or because I just agreed with this random agent to have this random actor on my show to talk about acting. Because of that, you know, Tonya's involvement in the comics and motion sphere is so massive, and her interaction with the Femon and things like that. And that's all just come from me just having a conversation with her about acting, but talking about nerdy stuff in between to pique her interest as opposed to a standard kind of interview. And I think about, there's lots of things like that. I'm not going to give you loads more examples because we're here all day, but like How I Met Megan is not dissimilar to that. How me being single at the time of meeting Megan, the chain of events is like the way I met certain girlfriends is really obscure, and only certain really specific things could have happened to do that. And so I think a film like this specifically, which is really a no pressure view onto what two people, this could genuinely be like, they could have released this as a documentary almost. You know how they sort of kind of marketed the UK Office, where when it was first coming, and the Blair Witch Project, people were like, is this real? Like, is this actually a thing? And that's what I like about it. Is like, I can't really talk about the plot. I can't really talk about what happened. It's really just a pleasant film about two people. It's not going to change your life necessarily, but there is one little quote I want to say from it, which is, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but I'm going to paraphrase it, which is, if you want to hear the whole thing, go to patreon.com/genuinechitchat, and you'll be able to listen to it in a couple of weeks, because I do read the whole quote. But it's essentially, one of the characters says, God is the space between, and it's where beings try to understand each other. And I just think that's so, I feel like almost Linklater has probably had 4 lines written that were very clever, and he was like, how can I get this to a movie? And it's that, and I'm just like, there's a lot more to it in that conversation, in that dialogue exchange, but I'm just like, I don't believe in God, but I think the idea of what God could represent in the positive ways, being the thing that isn't humans, is really the thing that tries to connect humans to be at their best. I just think that's so beautiful and so incredible. And so this is just one of those films where I'm like, it's not the best, I call them people movies. It's not the best people movie I've seen. It's not the best small cast movie I've seen, but it's very different to most of these kinds of films. And although I've not seen all of the films that you've chosen, one of them isn't far removed from this one. The one that I've seen, or one of the ones I've seen, is not far removed from this one. But I find that the majority of other films on your list or my list, or a lot of films I looked at, and I saw a lot of the people chose or mentioned in Discord, a lot of them are like post-apocalyptic or horror film, or someone's locked in a bunker, those kind of things. Yeah. But this film isn't that. There's no isolation. There's no trapping, which is a real common theme in at least a lot of my picks. It's the pure opposite. And I just really like the simplicity and really the beauty of that film.
I think I've actually gone for quite a similar kind of, because again, I tend to have a lot of kind of, I go for like the genre stuff, like the sci-fi, the horror stuff. But I think this time I've kind of, not unlike you, gone for a similar kind of taste. A lot of them are, my choices are about like the human condition and what we do and the connections between human beings as well. I've not seen this one, but I'm sure Tony will be very glad you mentioned it. I was going to watch it, but I didn't get a chance because I got a bit addicted to a Batman video game this weekend. So, and I couldn't tear myself away. I had to become friends with the Joker this week. I just had to. I just bloody had to, didn't I? So I haven't seen it, but I'm sure I will get to it very soon. I've been meaning to. I know that they're all very heavily involved with it. Julie Depley, I think, is her name, and Ethan Hawke. And
Julie Depley. So in the first one, she's not necessarily involved, apart from being an actress. But in the second one, she's a co-writer.
Yeah.
So it is, as you say. And I haven't told Megan that there's a trilogy because I was like that. No, unfortunately, knowing there's 3 films.
She doesn't like her franchises.
Allegedly, even though she likes to watch like a million horror films. But it's one of those things where I think knowing it's a trilogy kind of maybe takes away a little bit from it.
Sure.
A tiny bit, but I knew that going in, and I haven't told Megan there's a third. I've just said, oh, there's another one. But I would say to anyone, I'd say it's quite hard to hate this film unless you're the kind of person who only likes bang bang shoot films, but I don't think your listeners are generally like that as much. I think at some point,
I think it depends. It depends. Like I talk about all sorts of films, especially on the top 5s. I like to have a lot of variety. I don't want to just it be all horror films or all action films or all, though I love them, though I love comic book movies, I'm not going to have 5 comic book movies unless the list specifies top 5 comic book movies. Then I won't have just comic book movies. But even then I would have some variety within those. But yeah, I'm partial to a good, romance, a good people movie, as you call them. So it is something I'm hit and miss with Linklater. I don't remember really enjoying Dazed and Confused all that much. I think I've said this before, that I think Kevin Smith is more my Linklater, who was heavily inspired by Linklater, but that's more my kind of bag. That's more my kind of, talky people movie is that's me, because it does, it kind of fits in with who I am and what I like and stuff a bit more than maybe, I was never in the 60s or 70s. I don't know what that was like. I can only relate to so much, I think. It's definitely something I'm looking forward to watching, and I want to take the time and appreciate it and just take it all in, and if Tony's I take everybody's recommendations very seriously, and I am going to get round to it. But I think with a lot of the things, I've got to be in the right mood and I've got to have the right vibe.
This is one of those, and I'll say again, there's not much I can say about this unless we did a specific podcast breaking this whole thing down. But one thing I think you would appreciate about it, which is something I did, which is the main Ethan Hawke's character. I think it's either Jesse or James. I think it's Jesse. I think Jesse and James get a Pokemon. They connect together. But
and the cowboy, of course.
Well, exactly. So Jesse, James, and obviously the Pokemon characters of Team Rocket is referencing that, and he mentions in the film. He says, "Oh, my name's Jesse," and she's like, and he says, "Someone calls you Jesse James." The thing I think you would like about this film, again, there's no rush to watch it because it's around. The main character, Megan really didn't like him. And I said, well, I don't like him much either, but I think the reason I don't like him is because I see a reflection of what I was like when I was 22.
Yeah.
That kind of, not rude to anyone, but when someone's like there's a minor scene in there where a palm reader comes up and reads the palm of Julie Delpy's character. Yeah. And he's there and he doesn't really say much. And then she walks off and then he basically goes, essentially goes, it's all bullshit. She's just doing it for the money, blah, blah. Yeah. And she's like, I know that, but it's kind of nice to just try things. And he's a bit like, yeah, that's fine, but it's stupid and wrong.
Yeah, I was definitely that kid.
I was as well. And he's not
teenager
overtly rude. He's not like, you're an idiot. He's more just like, you got to be careful. There's people out there trying to get your money. And it's like, you can both be right. And that's, I think, the thing that I had to learn through my 20s is that you can actually be right about, oh, there's no proof of God necessarily, or, religion causes a lot of problems in the world. Yeah, that may be true, but that doesn't take away from how important religion is to other people's lives, or that God could be all of us, or and I think that being human is a lot about cognitive dissonance, which is about having two conflicting opinions on the same thing at the same time. And I think that people, especially from my experience, teenage boys or young adult men who are maybe, let's argue, slightly more intelligent than the average, or at least they think they are, I think they can get in the habit of they can't deal with the dissonance. They view it as hypocrisy, and therefore they have to have a binary opinion on things. It's a yes or a no.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's how I was for a huge amount of my life. And I see that in Ethan Hawke's character. And so I feel like if I saw this film when I was 20, it may have changed me a bit. Either I'd have been like, oh, this guy's a dick, I hate the film, or I'd have been like, oh shit, this is me. I need to.
But then you might have not been open to the message, Mike, either.
But that's it. So that's why I think you and a lot of other listeners, not that lots of listeners have got ego problems, but you and I have got common threads in our development and growth in our sort of years of potentially being a bit of a know-it-all in the past. I know I was and still am.
Yeah.
So that's my last kind of thing to say about that film for you in particular, is that is an appeal.
Definitely, yeah. It sounds right up my eye. Again, I was a little bit of a dickhead, not like a horrible person, but yeah, I wasn't perfect by any stretch. But but yeah, there's been a lot of growth, I think, for both of us in those intervening years. But yes, no, excellent choice. Again, I've not seen it, but I've heard a lot of good things, especially from Mr. Tony Farina. So I will eventually get round to that whenever that occurs, wherever I go. Whether it strikes me, I will get on that.
Yeah.
So we're gonna journey over to Hong Kong for my first pick.
Ooh.
We're going to look at a film called Fallen Angels from one of Quentin Tarantino's favourite directors, Wong Kar-wai. He's famous for directing Chungking Express, which is kind of a anthology film about different stories and people living in Hong Kong. This one was his second film, and he went out of his way to present it in a different way, used like wide-angle lenses, he put different filters on stuff, and very different kind of film. The main it's a kind of anthology as well. It follows several characters. One is a kind of lonely assassin, hitman, and he has a handler who is in love with him, and she's kind of can't meet him because that'll, business and pleasure will mix. There is also a guy who ate like a pineapple and became mute, who is now a criminal who goes out and breaks into businesses and then in the middle of the night forces people to engage in that business and pay him money. So he steals an ice cream van and gets a guy and starts beating him up and tying him up and forcing him to buy ice cream from him.
Okay. I thought the trailer, I want to clarify, I haven't seen all these films. I haven't seen I watched all the trailer. I watched one trailer of each, enough to get a taste.
Yes.
And I looked at the trailer and I was like, this trailer looks crazy, but I genuinely, it looks really interesting.
It's less about kind of like a set structure. I don't think Megan would like this.
I got that vibe. I was like, this looks cool as hell.
Yeah.
Megan is not going to.
It is cool. It is really cool. It's very like neon, grungy, kind of, again, very blurry. It feels like everything's just always set at 3 a.m. Like the whole film feels like that. Everything takes place about 3 a.m. And it's basically about all these different characters kind of living their lives and intersecting, but kind of trying to deal with their loneliness, looking for connection. And, the handler of the assassin can't be with him. So what she does, she breaks into his bedroom, his hotel room, and masturbates on the bed that he sleeps in. Like, there's all this kind of like isolation and existential kind of crisis going on. What's great about it is if you get bored by all that, there's some epic gunfights every so often. So, you got the best of both worlds. But yeah, it's a very interesting, unique film. It kind of says a lot about, I think, where Hong Kong was at the time and where cinema was going. I think there's a lot of Western influence here as well. And I think he went with Chungking Express. He did a whole tour of like the US and the Western world and became a really big name. A lot of people didn't really take to this one because it was very different from that previous film, and stylistically and tonally and just everything. It was a very experimental kind of postmodern film at the time, but it has developed kind of a cult status. I think it's over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, so people do like it. It is a good film. But yeah, I don't think a lot of people have seen it, but there's definitely there's a lot of humor to it, there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of raw emotion. Again, I don't really want to spoil it, but I don't think there is that much to spoil really. But the stories do intersect, so they do kind of cross paths, these various characters just trying to look for kind of meaning in their lives and where they are at the moment. And again, like you said, like that human connection and the human condition is very much explored in this film. And again, nice and short, nice and sweet. Again, there are other characters kind of float in and out, but the main kind of cast is only really about 4 or 5 people at most. And yeah, it's just stunningly shot, especially those, just the atmosphere and the vibe is something I could just watch all day. It was very unique and kind of had me engrossed the entire time. And again, if you want really cool 90s gunfights, this is your film as well.
In the trailer, you get to see a little bit of that. You can see one, I think, in like a cafe or a diner. And I was like, this feels like this is definitely inspired films like John Wick.
Oh, God.
And when I watched that, I was like, I got Old Boy vibes as well. I think Old Boy is quite like I've seen an odd amount, a surprisingly large amount of Western Asian movies. I know that the Tartan Asia Extreme is. I've seen quite a few of those movies because some of when my brother used to see a crazy.
I think Visitor Q is under that label.
100%.
Your 100%.
Copy, yeah. And so I've got there's a film called Machine Girl, which I can't remember a thing about. I watched it ages ago.
I covered. Me and Andy covered it.
I thought you did. I was fairly certain. Yeah.
Very early on, we did a Clone Wars, Machine Girl, and Robo Geisha. We did.
Yes. I think I did listen to that very early on when I first met you, but that was many moons ago.
I think that might have been my second or third or fourth Clone Wars. So it was very early, very, very, very early.
I think I'll have to go back because there's a lot of films I watched in a period of my life shortly after Dad passed away, and like there was a lot of films I watched where I wasn't sober. And so with various things, I was never like an addict and throwing my life away, but there were times I was quite messy, and I watched certain films.
I'm still messy.
But there's like certain films I've seen, and I'm like, I know I've seen it. I can't tell you a thing about it, but I've seen, and Machine Girl's one of those, but I know that's the kind of film that Megan's going to despise.
Oh, absolutely.
So I've got a couple of mates which I can watch really weird films with, and I do want to give that another go. But I will say, from the trailer of Fallen Angels, like I was interested in, and what I was going to say about some of the Asian cinema that I've seen, I think that a common thread I found quite a lot is isolation and meaning. I think those are threads that I seem to see in a lot of Asian cinema, Eastern cinema, because not that isn't in Western cinema, but I think that there's a lot more of like almost sadness between the lines. There's so many characters I see in these films where I know I keep mentioning Old Boy, but you're just kind of like a character who really doesn't know who they are, literally or figuratively. They're just kind of wandering a place, whether it be China or be it like Japan or whatever, and they're wandering a place and it feels like everyone's moving around them like 100 miles an hour, knows exactly where they're going, knows exactly what they're doing. Yeah, I'm going to be a businessman and do this and do that. And there's a lot of characters which are just like, I don't know what to do with myself. And so everyone else seems to know. And I've just fallen into this job or this relationship or this whatever because I've just kind of found myself here. And now I don't even know if I want to get out. And if I do, I don't even know how I would do that. And I think probably because of the political climate of a lot of Asian countries at the time, a lot of Asian cinema comes from countries which either were or still are run by communist dictators. And I think that really pushes hard on identity, because when you have a communist state and you're basically told everyone's identical, a lot of people feel that way and feel like, it's like with prisons and things a lot of the time. It's people lose the individuality and then they are in this like essentially bad mental health and they don't really know why or what to do with it. And I think a lot of Asian films bring out a lot of like extreme examples of that. Visitor Q and Takashi Miike does a lot of that. And I think that that's something that does really appeal to me is, again, that human element that you mentioned is that people don't know what to do. And there's a scene in the trailer of Fallen Angels where I think it's the hitman guy, and he's like riding on a motorcycle in like a tunnel and it's like a greenish hue to it. And I was like, that is such a beautiful shot. And again, I only saw it for a few seconds, but I was like, I can really get behind the idea of just being on like a motorcycle in a busy city at nighttime.
Smoking a cigarette, no helmet.
Exactly.
Doesn't give a fuck. I love
driving. Yeah. And just going, I'm just going to go where I go. And I'm like, I really connect, although I'm not at that part in my life anymore, really, I connect to that kind of thing, which is like surrounded by people, but actually quite alone. And I think that a lot of Asian cinema leans on that. So that film, of all the trailers I watched of your films, I won't mention the others because I'll spoil it. There's one other film of yours, which I hadn't seen, which I'm very interested to hear what you say about it, because I wasn't sure about the trailer. But Fallen Angels was the one trailer I watched. I was like, that looks so cool.
It is.
I'm definitely going to try and watch that when I get a spare moment. 100%.
Definitely. I 100% agree. I really enjoyed it, and again, I think it's that men live lives of quiet desperation that came across quite a lot when I was watching it, and again, it's almost like it's not showy with the emotion either. Like it's not like I'm lonely. I think Western cinema would do that, would like 100%. Express it like that, and I think with this, it's not that they're going, they're not like emoting, because that's easy enough to do. I think it is genuinely the feel and the vibe and of the film itself, as opposed to the characters going, you know, I'm lonely, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm, you know, it's just the vibe of it. But again, there's something quite almost kind of, I don't know, liberating and beautiful about the just knowing that, and knowing that other humans experiencing this feeling the way that you do. You know, how many nights do we wake up, some people wake up alone. I know I wake up alone at 3 a.m. a lot, and yeah, there's times you're like, fuck, you know, here it is, another night alone, and I'm, you know, in my bedroom. But like, that's very relatable, I think, to a lot of people, you know, who have, you know, nobody, or they've lost people or what have you. And, you know, and yeah, I found that very powerful. But yeah, there's still a lot of humor to it. It's quite, there's light, there's levity to it, and there's action as well. So it's got a good mix of everything. And that's why I thought, again, it's a good choice for this, because again, it's something a bit different, a little obscure. Excellent film, truly excellent.
Definitely going to give that a go.
Yes, I agree. You should. I think it's something you'll really enjoy. So yeah, moving on. What's your next pick?
So this was, again, going to be my number 3, technically. But I'm building there because the top 2 are going to be I'm gonna have a little break between. So this film is 10 Cloverfield Lane. I don't know why I kept calling it 12 Cloverfield Lane, and Dan for some reason just patiently didn't correct me in the messages.
I knew what film you meant.
Yeah,
you know, I was like, it's not wrong really, even though it is, but it's not wildly, you know.
So it's one of those films where, so people know the film Cloverfield because that film came out and reinvigorated the what's it called, shaky cam genre.
Found footage, yeah.
Found footage as well. Yeah, it was almost like my generation's Blair Witch Project, really, Cloverfield.
Yeah,
everyone was talking about it. It was everywhere for so long. And it's funny with Cloverfield because I think Cloverfield is a brilliant short film. The first half hour of it is overtly shit because it just takes forever to get into it, introduces you to loads of characters that die within seconds. And you're just like, why did you give so much dialogue to this brother character? Spoiler alert, they die immediately. It means nothing. It's not like a spoiler because spoilers have meaning. It literally means nothing. There's So when 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, I liked Cloverfield. I enjoyed it. I thought it did a lot more right than is wrong. I think when the alien invasion gets going, I'm like, it's brilliant. There's a scene where someone, like a silhouette of someone goes behind like a sheet and pops out of them, and it just cuts away, and you're like, what happened to her? And one of the characters, I think, says, what's happened? And they're like, you can't know, just keep going. And it's like, oh, okay. And I like that it leaves a lot of questions unanswered. I then think the studio's got a bit greedy, which does sometimes happen, and went, we can make a franchise out of Cloverfield. And I'm like, oh no. So there's also Cloverfield Paradox, which is not great. Again,
I've heard this.
The last half, there's a couple of bits of body horror that are brilliant, really well made. I was like astoundingly good looking. The plot itself is not good. The characters are boring, and it all just builds up to quite an obvious payoff. But this film is really weird because I would encourage. Unfortunately, me saying this is going to spoil it, but I can't not spoil it. But it's part of the Cloverfield trilogy. Okay, people know the Cloverfield trilogy is about alien invasion, so that's a part of it. But knowing that going in, I think it would be stronger not knowing that going in. But I think even knowing that, there's still so much mystery and intrigue, because even though you know loosely, in some realm, it connects to that trilogy, you don't know where in the timeline, you don't know how it does. And that's the best thing. I would say going into this film, as what I've just told everyone, that's as much as you should really know going into this film. I'm not going to spoil anything else about it. I'm not going to say anything else apart from all it is essentially the first 2 minutes of the film. A woman's driving on the road and she gets into a car crash, and she wakes up in a bunker, and she's with 2 other people. And one of them is played by John Goodman, who's phenomenal in this.
He's great.
It's one of his best roles, I think. I think it's one of his best. And it's not his usual role, which I think...
Playing against type. He's not a good man in this, is he?
No. And, John Goodman is everyone knows John Goodman as the family-friendly, lovable man. Even Sully in Monsters, Inc., which is how a lot of me and my friends know him, his voice more than anything. The main character, the woman who crashes, is Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who's one of my favorite actors. I love her. She also has an album called Got a Girl, which is phenomenal. It's such a good album. And the director of 10 Cloverfield Lane is Dan Trachtenberg, who also directed and wrote Prey, which I've not seen yet because I want to do a whole Predator rewatch. He also did the Black Mirror episode Playtest, which has got Wyatt Russell in, which is one of the better Black Mirror episodes I've seen, but I've only seen the first 2 series. And he also did the premiere episode of The Boys, season 1, episode 1. So this guy, he's hitting home runs, okay? And this film is another one. It's isolated, it's in a bunker, there's only 3 people. You haven't, even though with the context I've already given you, you don't know what's happened. You don't know. And knowing it's a Cloverfield film doesn't affect that. I want to make that very clear that you think you know and you don't, and it's very interesting in that way. And I just think it's a succinct, short, character-driven movie where there's enough mystery and intrigue to keep you going, but there's not so much you're just like, what the fuck is going on? You really have a good idea at all times. There's a thing that I believe you and Jack mentioned again in the Texas Chainsaw Back to Filmography pod, which is something that I agree completely with you on, which is I hate it in films when you can't get a bearing of where things are in relation to other things. And in this bunker, every scene, you know exactly where things are in relation to other things. And I think that the feeling of isolation, and when there's certain rooms you go in that you've not been in before, and you go, why have I not seen this room before? Those kinds of internal questions get answered. I've only seen this film, I think this is my 2nd or 3rd watch. I bought it on Blu-ray Steelbook after I saw it at the cinema. I was really surprised by it. But it seems like not, I think because Cloverfield was quite a divisive film, I think not a lot of people went and watched this. I don't know how the marketing was. I can't really remember. I just remember seeing John Goodman and Mary Elizabeth Winstead and it loosely being connected to Cloverfield. And I was like, you know what, I'm in. And it's so different. I genuinely wish this film had come out first, then Cloverfield did. Granted, it would have got made if that was the case. Yeah. But I was really surprised. And on the rewatch, Megan really enjoyed it as well, which is normally quite a good thing because she dislikes a lot of films. But it fits, it's a thriller. I wouldn't say it's a horror, but it fits into so many kind of genres in a way. For me, at least, it does have its own identity, but it does feel like, an isolation kind of film. It's got mystery. And I was just, even on the rewatch where I remembered what happened, I was still at certain points at the edge of my seat. But I believe that you hadn't seen this film before I
had not.
Pass it back to you.
Yeah, I was really glad you brought this to me. It was on my list of ones for Andy for our sharing the silver screen, which I've now taken it off, so Andy can't complain. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I believe it may have been called something different, and I think for marketing they decided to tie it into Cloverfield. I think that was the idea.
They should have called it Down the Lane, and then at the end said Down Cloverfield Lane or something.
Yeah.
Story.
Yeah, but again, they'd be like, well, I saw a different film. It was advertised as a different title. Like, what have I seen? They'll think they're going in for the wrong film. But no, I agree. I think it's got everything that you would want. I think it's got strong performances, characters, there's so much tension as well, like palpable tension that's created by the performances of these actors. There's humor, there's character development. Like you said, the geography of it is very good. Again, it kind of a bottle movie as well in the one location. And then what I love about it is you think John Goodman's character's lying a lot of the time, and there's some nefarious thing he's got going on, but then like certain things convince Mary Elizabeth Winstead that he's not lying, and then you're like, oh, maybe he's all right, maybe he's a nice guy, maybe he's not dodgy at all. And then again, I won't spoil it, but there's
questions get raised and then answered, but then you go,
and then you're like,
is that answer?
And the way he's acting, you're like, but is he dodgy or is he nice, or what's his plan, and how did he come to this? And there's a lot of holes in the story, but again, there's a lot here to enjoy. And what do they do in the bunker? How do they manage it? How do they work together? And again, there's genuine moments of characters caring for each other or being antagonistic. It's wonderful. I thought this was superb. And again, you don't need to know anything about the other Cloverfield films. You could just watch this in isolation and enjoy it, like you said. And it's got everything you would want. There's horror elements, there's thriller elements, everything I've already mentioned. But yeah, I would highly recommend this one as well. I thought it was phenomenal.
Agree, yeah. And I'll just bounce off that, which is how tense it is such a key part of it, without it feeling artificial, because they use...
There's a moment with the keys, which I was
like, the keys. And you're just like, oh God. And then again, and there's certain moments where you think, oh, I can see where this is going. And it kind of goes where you think, and then something comes out of it and you're like, oh, that changes things a bit. And you are taken on the journey that that Mary Elizabeth Winstead's taken on. And the whole time you're like, I don't know how to feel about John Goodman's character. And you just don't know.
It kind of puts you in the character's place. Like, you absolutely feel like the character. You don't know what's true. You don't know what's right. You don't know where to go, how to do, what to do. And then you get more. The more information you get, it's kind of more confusing, and it's kind of like,
and you get like subtle bits where you're like, did they just do a weird thing when they said that word, or is that such good acting, or is that like? And by the end of it, you're like, every little thing in this makes sense, and there's very little music as well, which usually I'm not as much of a fan of. Although I think in all my choices, I think there is essentially very little music in any of my choices. Actually, looking at them, but again, I think
there's a lot of really cool needle drops in Fallen Angels. I will say that, but yeah, some absolutely great needle drops in that film. But yeah, no, I think that it works though because of that, and I think it gives that sense of uncomfortableness. It's not like watching a silent movie and they don't have the live orchestra there in the cinema like they used to. It's not like that. And you're like, fucking hell, play a bit of music, get it going, get it moving. It does work, and again, it's sharply edited. Sharp as a tack, the whole thing. And again, like it does have a lot of twists and turns, and you're kind of discombobulated by everything at every turn, much like the character. And I think that's why you identify with it so much, is because they make such a concerted effort to put you in her shoes. Great choice, Mike. Fantastic choice. Right, moving on to mine. I'm going to pick a film that has one of the longest titles in cinema history.
Oh, God.
Which is Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean from 1982. This is directed by Robert Altman. I chose one of his films in another one of my top fives. That was the Player, and that was in our top 5 films that feature full frontal male nudity with Rhea. Excellent film, just so happened to have a big dong in it. So the more I watch Robert Altman films, the more I'm like, fuck, why have I not seen any of his stuff before? Because it's really powerful, it's really entertaining, he's just got something. And in The Player, he had like every actor in Hollywood in that film cameoing, even for like 2 seconds. So people like him, people respect him, people know his work. This was a play he directed, again based on a play, and he decided to make this into a film. So it stars Cher, Karen Black, and Kathy Bates, and Academy Award winners, like this whole cast, mostly women apart from one actor. Basically, the disciples of Jimmy Dean, of James Dean. So it's a fan club who used to work at Woolworths in the kind of Southern America belt, I think, somewhere down there. And basically they're reuniting 20 years after his death, just meeting up again and having a good time. They keep flashing back to the past, so you get a kind of an idea of what happened. They kind of use this device where they kind of look through a mirror. And again, it's very much shot like a play, it's staged like a play.
Great stagecraft.
Oh, absolutely, like expertly. But I like the idea that it's almost like you are in the play to a degree.
Yeah.
And again, very, all in one location as well. You don't move from this one location, but they manage to kind of paint this world outside of the shop very well. And what happens is, as the people kind of turn up for the reunion, we kind of learn a bit more about the characters, and a strange woman turns up. And this is Joanna Qualley, who turns out to be a trans woman who has transitioned from, in the intervening 20 years, from Joe Qualley, who was a friend of theirs, who was a gay man, and is now transitioned into a woman. And as she arrives and reveals her identity, Joanna, all the kind of characters kind of are thrown by this, but are kind of very respectful and loving and caring about it. But they have their own issues going on, and it kind of paints a picture of female kind of trauma and the patriarchal world they live in, and the kind of hard lives they've had to live. And people come up with these, they talk about stories about cancer, and there's stories about sexual assault, and there's kind of these manufactured delusions about people they've had sex with or had made love to. There's child abuse and kind of creating almost like, you know, a mentally disabled child, even though they're not. There's so much
religious
kind of,
stuff. Where
yeah,
like,
you're right.
The elements of like how like this film, I'd say I was surprised by, because I'd never heard of this film. I'd never seen anything of Robin Altman's.
Yeah.
I remember listening to that podcast where with the player, and I remember you going, everyone in Hollywood wanted a cameo in that, but I hadn't made the connection there. But this film, although I think it's probably one of the worst titled films in history, I think it should just be called 20 Years Later.
Yeah,
simple.
Come back to the five and dime is fine.
Back at the five and dime 20 years later. Just some indication, because if I knew this film going in was you've essentially got the main plot and then probably a quarter-ish of the film is the flashbacks, but the stagecraft of the flashbacks is they've got the store, they've got a mirror, and then the mirror that it lights up, and then you've got a mirror reflection like an inverse of the store, and all the flashbacks happen there. And I was like, it's very clever. I mean, they do it in shows where, you know, someone in modern day trips over, gets a cut on their face, and then it does flashbacks, and you know when they don't have a cut, it's in the past. When they do, it's
indicates
13 reasons why I use that. But like, I was really surprised by this film. Because not only was the stagecraft stuff really cool, and I found that the acting was surprisingly good for the most part. I think one of the main actors, I was like, is she a terrible actor or is the character just awful? And I was like, okay,
I know which one you're talking.
Yeah, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's the character, because by the end of it, you're like, oh, she's okay, she has problems. But I think that what really blew me away, and I'll say to anyone, I would recommend people watch this film, because this was one of the 2 films of Dan's that I did manage to watch. I really recommend people watch this. It is a very slow burn. The first, it's almost 2 hours. You can find it on YouTube. It's an hour 50. And I would say the first 45 minutes, I was like, there's got to be something here. I was like, Dan, what is this? What am I missing? And then I think it's around the time that Joanne comes in, or it kind of gets revealed who they are. And I'm like, oh, a trans character in 1982 who's not the butt of a joke, who's a major character, who has massive implications on the plot, who has their own agency, reasons for doing what they do, still keeps their identity, and their friends essentially accept them. And the only one that really has the only 2 that really have problems with it is someone who's severely religious to a fault, and someone who's already fairly delusional. And you're like, yes, this isn't even like this is a big part of the plot. This isn't the main plot line. And I'm like, the fact that they did that, even if they did that today, that would be considered quite a progressive thing. Loads of people would be whinging on the internet about how woke it is.
This is what I was going to say. People people talk about like the good old days and like, oh, everything's fucking political. Everyone's got issues now. It's like, yeah, that's the way it's always been. That's the way it's always been.
It's just the internet's connected us now.
Yeah, and now, we now know about it, and people are commenting on it, and have to, you know, how to train your dragon is now up in arms because there's a mixed race girl playing Astrid, but even though a person of color played the original character in the animated show anyway, in the animated film anyway. But yeah, it drives me mad, that sort of shit. I'm just like, you're allowed to, like, films are inherently about issues, and they're inherently political. They're inherently going to feature characters that you don't necessarily identify with, non-white, non-religious, not the same sex as you, whatever, just fucking accept it. Get out of your comfort zone and listen, go to a drag show, go doing this, see stuff by black creators. That's the whole fucking point. Get a fucking perspective from other people. But exactly that, Mike, exactly what you were saying. I thought, you know what, I'll give this a go. It sounds interesting, sounds intriguing. And again, like you said, the stagecraft, it's almost like looking into the mirrors, like looking into their own soul and their past and who they were, and kind of almost reminiscing about the horrible shit that's happened to them, that's made them who they are. Which is, again, like, you don't see any other characters. You don't see Jimmy Dean, who is the child of one of the characters. You don't see any other kind of male characters apart from Joe in 1955 before the transition. And I thought it was incredible. Like, Cher, I think is phenomenal in this. Like,
I was surprised, to be honest.
I was like I'm not like a huge massive Cher fan, but I've seen her in stuff. But I can see why like she has the clout. I can see why she does so well. And, you know, she's in Mermaids and Moonlight, I think it is, and the other one she won the Oscar for. You know,
Yeah,
I can see
Burlesque as well, I think it
Burlesque,
is.
Yeah, which she says is probably not her best performance.
Well, it's just because Megan's mentioned it. So I'm like, oh yeah, she's like, Burlesque is okay, but Coyote Ugly is a really good film. I don't think that's for sharing it, but I just got, for some reason, for me, Burlesque and Coyote Ugly are just two films I've never seen that are connected.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. I can see where your connective tissue is there, but but I genuinely thought it was a great drama. You are riveted by the characters, their stories, and their kind of, again, the openness and the acceptance of it. Again, and again, like they're making jokes about it, but not in they're not making jokes about the transition in like a negative way. They're talking, and there's more revelations as the film goes on. But they still love each other. They still care for each other. Yeah, there's complicated feelings, and you know, certain people, you know, let things happen, or you know, had sex with other people. But yeah, I think it was genuinely just a gripping kind of drama. It takes a little while to get going. I agree. It does take a little while to like, okay, where are we going with this? What's going to happen? What's the nugget in the middle of this? What is the thing I can really hold on to? And again, I think way ahead of its time. Again, I think like we talked about with Scott with when we did our kind of British kind of revenge films, when we talked about The Victim, I think it's called, and that was way ahead of its time in kind of representation, and kind of helped get kind of very outdated anti-LGBTQIA plus laws removed, ended because of the work that was put in. I think go back to this and then you can go, oh yeah, everything's about trans politics now and trans rights and trans this. You can be like, well, it's been happening for a long time, because this is set in 1975 for a start.
Yeah.
Like the film, so it's 20 years from 1955, so it's set in 1975, and the play came out around about the same time, I believe, or was written around that time, and then the film came out in 82. And again, I think it's superb. I think Karen Black is brilliant as well. I think she does a superb job, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's the star of Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and he had a documentary about him and his life. He's had a hard old life as well, but he's a fascinating person and really, really interesting, but can't remember his name off the top of my head.
In the gentleman actor in Come Back to the...
Yes, yeah.
Mark Patton, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was it, Mark Patton. Yeah, so he has a documentary about his kind of life and him being an openly gay man and him contracting HIV, and yeah, it's a great documentary. And he was. He kind of confronted the writing and the producers within that film about him, but he's kind of embraced that film now, because it's become kind of like I don't know what's the term, kind of a linchpin in the LGBTQIA plus community, that film. And there's kind of drag shows about it and stuff, and he goes on and he does the dance he does in the film, and he's fantastic in this as well. Very, very short amount of screen time, but yeah, they all of them transition from the stage version into the film version. There is not an actor that was not in the stage version that is not in this film. They just translate it, and I think they do it perfectly.
I think my last point on that film, I'd say of all these films we speak about, it's definitely not my favorite.
Sure.
I think it was one that after watching, I thought about amidst the most.
Yeah, I think
my top two picks I thought about the most after watching them, because I still have thoughts about them today, no matter how many times I watch them. But excluding my two top picks, which are special to me in reasons I'll go into, but this film, I'd say it's on YouTube, guys, so you can watch it for free, and it's really important, not just because of the progressive side, which is obviously really interesting, but I think for me, what it does is it shows how friends can stay friends, and they can acknowledge that they're all flawed in their own ways, and they may lie to each other for their own reasons, knowingly or unknowing. But at the end of the day, we're all flawed, and you just love each other for who you are. Even if you butt heads, even if there's things that have happened in your past that you're not proud of, or for any reason, there's points where characters go, you lied to me about this. And they go, yes, because X, Y, Z. And they go, that's okay. And they, and I just think it's a real beautiful film. And in a lot of ways, I think this is like, I don't like throwing this term around too much because I think it can be loaded, but I think it's like a great feminist film, because it's not trying to be a feminist film. And I can't see someone watching this film who's got any sense in them at all thinking this is what would be classed as feminist propaganda. The Ghostbusters 2016 with all female cast, I like that film. No one else does. If they say that's the kind of issue with wokeness, blah, 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 blah. I disagree, but unfortunately, I can kind of see part of the argument for remaking a film with all the same cast.
Yeah.
With a film like this, which tackles infinitely more social issues, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to do it for a reason, aside from this is the story it's telling. Yes. It's a story about people. It's a story that primarily focuses on women. And as you say, the traumas they face, they all go through something different for different reasons. I mean, a really minor character, Kathy Bates isn't it a bit, but it's really weird because for the whole film, I was like, she's not really said anything. And then right at the end, she has a little outburst about not having kids. And I was like, that actually says a lot. Because there's one character who just has a lot of kids and Kathy Bates who has none. And the whole time Kathy Bates is like, I'm fine. It doesn't matter. I'm having fun. I'm fine. I get to do all this stuff. And then there's just one moment where she just snaps. And she just shouts like one sentence and they all go quiet. And then after that scene, she's a lot more reserved, but she's also drinking a lot more. And I'm like, that's just so clever. There's so much thought that's gone into the performance and the writing of this. I didn't know what to expect about this film, but I was so impressed by it all. And I'm really thankful that of the films that you selected, this was one of them. And this was one that I watched as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with them being based on plays, the plays have to be good. The writing has to be good. The characters have to be fully realized. You can't get away with a half-assed script and then put loads of special effects on it, or you can try and cover up the cracks. The play is, and again, that's a very minimalist play. It's just the Woolworths that they are in, which is not a word I've used for several years.
I was going to say, hearing them say Woolworths, I was like, oh my god, throwback.
That is a throwback. But there's such effort, and again, you can tell that these actors have lived these roles, lived these characters. I think everyone's superb. And again, 3 of them are Academy Award winners. It goes to show. And again, I think the writing only propels it and strengthens it, and the performances are that good because again, they've done the play, they've done the film, they know these characters inside and out, and Altman's just going, right, we're going to do this again, we're just going to do it, we're just going to slightly tweak it here and there. And a lot of people said the film was actually better than the play version, so they may have well improved on what they had. But yeah, I genuinely think it's just, if you're looking for a good, again, there's joyful moments, there's sad moments, there's there's fun moments as well, while still kind of negotiating all these issues. Again, it's not forcing you to confront things, it's just asking you to question them, which is what these kind of films can do.
Asking you to listen, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not asking for your opinion, it's just saying, listen.
No, exactly.
This is what these people have gone through.
Yeah. And isn't it awful? Isn't it tragic? Could the world be better? Could the patriarchal world be improved in some way? And I think I saw like a post recently on my Instagram, and it was like behind every successful man is a woman with a broken heart, and I was like, yeah, I can believe that. Anyway, what is your next pick, Mike?
So this is the one which was me rambling and wording everything really weirdly at the start to kind of explain. So this is technically, if I'm ranking them again, Cloverfield is number 3 out of 5, as in number 1 being the best. 3 is Cloverfield, 4 is Before Sunrise, 5 is this film. Now this film is called Locke. It's starring Tom Hardy. He is the only character you see in the entire film. The entire film is 2 or 3 cameras mounted on a BMW X5. I only know that because it says it in the trivia. But it's him driving down a motorway. It's him going from somewhere in Wales to, I think, like somewhere in London, essentially. And it's just him in a car driving. And I wrongly thought it was because he was locked in a car, and that's what's called Locke. It's not. It's Locke with an E, and it's because it's his name. So it's this well-spoken, lovely-seeming Welsh gentleman, played by Tom Hardy. I don't know why he did the Welsh accent, but whatever. Let's go with it.
Why did he do any of the voices he does, Mike?
I know, in so many films, he does such weird voices. And I really rate Tom Hardy as an actor, but I'm also kind of like, his voice is the one thing, and I'm like, probably half of the films he doesn't need to put on a voice. His normal speaking voice is quite odd anyway. You don't need to make it weirder most of the time. But, when I've seen him in things like Legend and Lawless, I think the 3 L's, Legend, Lawless, and Locke, I think are really great Tom Hardy films. Locke, there's not much to say because anything I say about this film is going to spoil it, really. Right. But it's a film about a guy, and he's just on the phone the whole time. He's talking. He's essentially speaking to 5 different people on the phone, in general. And you find this out very early on in the film, so I'm going to very briefly say, and it's one of them is his wife, one of them is someone that he cheated on his wife with, one of them's his boss, one of them's his sort of subordinate, and one of them's then kind of his kids who are, living in the house with his wife. So it's essentially this drive for him. He's going on a very long drive from Wales to London for several hours, and essentially it's come at the worst conceivable time. And because I mentioned, obviously, he's the person he cheated on his wife with, no one knows about that. No one at his work, his wife, his family, no one. And this drive is essentially where everything comes out of the woodwork. It's one of those scripts where you're like, the script is just perfect because nothing else really needs to be in it. Essentially, as long as the main character can perform well, and Tom Hardy, phenomenal actor, and you've got, the voice, one of the characters, Olivia Colman, who the more I see of her, the more I love her. I mean, when I used to see her in lots of like indie British stuff in the late 90s.
I'm a big Peep Show fan, and that's where she
that's it. That's
basically
where she started.
began, yeah.
And you see her now, and she's like performing as the Queen, and you're like, and she's this fancy actor. I mean, she's in a film called Tyrannosaur, which is a small cast film. I don't know if you've seen it.
I've not seen it, but I think it's quite harrowing, isn't it? I believe
it's one of the most horror. It's a brilliant film. I'm never ever watching it again ever. I've got it on DVD. I'm never watching it because if I show it to Megan, it will crush her. It's one of those films that you watch it and it's very powerful. And if you want a hard hitting sad film starring Olivia Colman, that's a British film, watch it. But the last 20 minutes, it's generally, even thinking about it now makes me want to cry, and it's just so real and brutal. And it's not like, oh, you watch a scene of loads of kids being killed. It's not that. It's so much more real, and it's so much more upsetting. And Olivia
I watch that all the
Colman's
time, Mike. That's not upsetting. That's fine.
Star Wars Ready the Sith. You know,
easy.
But Olivia Colman's performance in that is one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life, and it just beyond. So Locke, it's just a really good film. And the reason I was all weird and rambly about this at the start is because I was torn between 3 films for my number 5. I'd not seen Locke before. I'd not seen Buried with Ryan Reynolds, and I saw Phone Booth with Colin Farrell like a decade ago, and I wanted to rewatch that. Those were the 3 contenders. And the weird thing is all 3 of them I didn't choose this. All of them are heavily connected by phones. In Buried, he's in a coffin. The only way he communicates with the outside world is with the phone, and that's the only way you get any conversation out of him, really. Locke, it's all on the phone, and then Phone Booth, spoiler, it's on a phone, in a booth, phone booth. So all 3 of those films, I think, if you want to watch a trilogy of small cast films that are about pretty much one person in one area, let's say, one room, kind of, who can't move out of that room, for one reason or another, sometimes it's their own doing, sometimes not. Weirdly enough, these 3 films work so well together. Now, they were going to be honourable mentions, but I've got other honourable mentions. But I just want to say, with Locke, Buried, and Phone Booth, they've got 7.1, 7, and 7.1 out of 10.
Wow.
They're all within like 10 minutes of each other. They're all about a seeming lack of control of the situation one is in, and by the end of each of the films you realize the main character had a lot more say and or control in the situation that they found themselves in than you were initially believed to think. Like, if you could almost do a 3-way Clone Wars in these 3 films, because there are so many threads between them. And so the reason I chose Locke over Buried and Phone Booth is I did enjoy Buried, but I found the first half I wasn't bought in. Ryan Reynolds, I like him as Deadpool. That's about it. I'm really starting to realize I don't actually like him as an actor very much.
He's done a lot of shite. I'll be honest. He's done a lot of shite. I was the same with Buried. It didn't really grab me.
No,
you know,
it's all right.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
But it's good enough to like. It's not that long.
I gave it a go, and
watch it.
I give it a go. But it wasn't my bag. For whatever reason. But I think that's why actors do these kind of films as well, to kind of challenge themselves. I think it's can we pull this off? This one person, one location, one thing. Also, we know it can be cheap, but can we get the effectiveness of this idea, and can we hold the audience's attention, which I think is tricky. It is hard to do.
100%. And I think with Buried, the first half hour I wasn't bought in. I almost turned it off, to be honest with you, because it was the last film. No, I watched Locke after this, actually. So Buried I was tempted to use Buried, but it was kind of, unfortunately, Buried is kind of what you see is on the tin. It's a guy locked in a coffin for the length of the film, and he tries to get out. And it's like, there's more you learn about him, but none of it surprised me. None of it shocked me. And then when it ended, I was like, okay, Whereas Locke, I was like, this is a very human film, not far removed from Before Sunrise, actually. In this one car journey, you find out more about the character of Locke than you probably would by knowing someone for several years. And a lot of people say that to him on the phone, which I really enjoyed. So that's why I chose Locke over Buried. Now, Phone Booth, I loved Phone Booth when I first watched it. And on the rewatch, I still loved it, even more so. Forrest Whitaker in that film. I mean, Forrest Whitaker's one of those actors who I just think can do no wrong. He's phenomenal in anything. And he's great. Colin Farrell, I mean, this was the first film I saw of Colin Farrell, and I was like, oh, he can actually act really well. And then I saw him in Bruges. Then I saw him in this and that. And I'm like, actually, Colin Farrell's an amazing actor. Obviously, now everyone's recognized that because of Penguin and stuff like that. But, you know, Phone Booth really blew me away. But the one reason I didn't choose it for this collection, and I chose Locke over it, is that Phone Booth, although it starts quite isolated, there's actually quite a lot of named cast members in it who do have a decent amount of dialogue, who actually do have an impact on the story, and it doesn't feel insular or isolated. It feels quite big Hollywood-esque type film. Yeah. And it works really well, but I didn't feel like it fit the vibe that I was going for on that. So those three films, enjoy them all. I think Locke and Phone Booth, definitely, anyone listening to this, definitely watch Locke and Phone Booth. Phone Booth is so thrilling. I was still blown away by how clever it was.
People still forget, like, Joel Schumacher, who directed Batman and Robin, is a really good director. Lost Boys, you know, that. If you go through his filmography, it's really solid. It's a really solid filmography. But everyone always just thinks of Batman, you know, Batman and Robin. Again, an openly gay director in like 1987 doing Lost Boys is basically unheard of at that time. You know, it's crazy. Or even in the 90s, or even in the 2000s. You know, so like, fair play to him. Like, he does know what he's doing. You know, he does good films. It's just, unfortunately, because Batman and Robin was such a disaster on so many levels, people seem to just think, oh, he's shit. And that seems to be the common misconception. But his filmography is good. And Phone Booth is one of the best examples of it.
Yeah, I would say, of all, obviously my top two, I'd say everyone watched those films and everyone watched, you know, lots of dance films. But I'd say of this list, excluding my top two, I would say the films for my personally that I think people should go away and watch really is 10 Cloverfield Lane, because it would just surprise you. Come back to the Five and Dime, because even though we've spoken about it a lot, it will surprise you.
It will. Yeah.
And then, oddly enough, although I really like Locke, I think Phone Booth. Locke is a great movie. But Phone Booth, it surprised me how good it still holds up. But the last thing I'll say about Locke is, one reason I chose it for this, again, it's a bit different to the other films, because it's not, although there is a degree of isolation, it's the only film of those three where the character is not forced into the situation they're in. You know, in Ryan Reynolds, he's buried in a coffin. The whole film is him trying to get out. Phone Booth is Colin Farrell answers the phone, and it's a guy with a sniper rifle who tells you in the first like 2 minutes. And he basically wants to leave the phone call, but if he does, he'll get shot. So both of those films, 10 Cloverfield Lane, they're stuck in a bunker. My two other picks is there's not really a way out necessarily. But with Locke, it is he's choosing to drive from where he is to another place for a reason, which I won't spoil. And he's choosing to do that. And he's not trapped in the back of a car and he can't get out. He himself is driving himself there against the advice of everyone around him. And I think that's so interesting. And I think that there's no action. You know, with Buried, there is action. With Phone Booth, there's loads of action. But with Locke, there isn't any. Locke feels more like Before Sunrise than any other film. And I really want to applaud Locke. And I don't think it'll be the film for everyone. I think quite a few people will probably watch it and think it's a bit boring. But I really enjoyed Locke. And I think of those three for this list, I would say that's why I wanted to choose it.
Excellent. Sounds good. Another one I didn't watch, but I'm definitely, it was already on my list, much like Before Sunrise. I'm always going, is it before sunrise? Is it before sunset? Is it before midnight? Is it before dusk?
The only reason I remember is because in Before Sunrise, one of the characters has to get a train first thing in the morning.
Right.
That is the literal only way I in my head have remembered.
Have to remember it, yeah.
So so watch it and then you'll be able to do it.
Then I'll know. Then I'll know how to manage all the sequels. So no worries. So yes, well, speaking of people who get themselves into situations, my next choice is Creep. Now, this is the 2014 Creep, not the, I think, 2005, like the Subway one, the London Underground horror film. Not that one, but this one. So this is directed, written, produced, and starring Patrick Bryce and Mark Duplass. It is a found footage film about a man who is supposedly dying from cancer, and he wants someone to document for his son that he'll never see grow up. He references a film called My Life and says he wants to do something like that. So, he's filmed, having a bath, he kind of gives sage advice and things like that. And this young videographer kind of turns up and is promised money for this and meets this person called Joseph. And slowly but surely, we see Joseph might not be the most, let's say, mentally sound. He kind of is shown to be kind of a bit scatty, kind of like skitty, not really, he'll kind of almost bipolar almost. He'll scare people and then he'll be like, oh, it's fine. But then also he's quite charming and you kind of are pulled in, and it's quite a sensitive thing, and he's clearly struggling with his mental health. And again, this is why the videographer kind of starts every so often when there's something that makes him want to leave, he kind of pulls it back and goes, oh no, well, I'm dying and I'm going through a lot of stuff and my family and my son and all this. And he goes, okay, right. Well, and he stays, but then more stuff happens and weirder stuff happens and freakier stuff happens. And you're like, you got to get out of there. You got to get out of there. And again, it's another kind of found footage kind of situation. It's all shot on like a video camera. It's almost entirely improvised as well, and I think that adds to the realism of it. It was created by several conversations that Bryce and Duplass had, and it was inspired by Duplass's kind of experience with people on Craigslist as well.
Okay.
So like, there's kind of some real things here. These people do really exist out there, and yeah, it's fascinating. And again, it's mostly just Duplass on screen the entire time. And he is so charismatic, whether he is being absolutely batshit insane and weird and creepy and odd, but also when he's like, being sensitive and shy and, self-deprecating. It is just a masterclass of again gluing you to the screen and just grabbing you by the neck and just pulling you in. And again, you feel all the things that this character feels. You're like, yeah, maybe I should help him. Maybe he's not that bad. Maybe he's okay. And I think we've all met people who were like, I don't know if you're a good person or I should be around you, whether you're safe or not, but you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, I think. And
100%.
Yeah, and we've all met people like this. However briefly, I may have lived with some, in fact. We've all had friends like that. You have your dickhead friends, or and we're all kind of, we all have our own stuff going on. And I'm not saying any of the people I've, friends with, lived with, or known go as far as maybe Joseph does in this film, but you never know. You can never quite. You're always on edge. I think it was a bit like 10 Cloverfield Lane. You're always kind of on edge with this character, but also you're kind of drawn to him as well. It's strange. You're disturbed by him, but you're also drawn to him. It's phenomenal. Shot in 5 days as well.
Yeah.
Like insane. Again, it's very short. It's about an hour and 15, I think. Hour and 20 maybe.
It's on Netflix at the moment in the UK.
It's on Netflix. Not only is Second Sight releasing a brand new kind of collector's edition for this film, there is also a new show. There is a sequel, a film sequel, Creep 2, and there's also the Creep tapes, which have just come out on Netflix as well, which is, again, quite a few years after the previous films. But yeah, I adored this watching it. I absolutely love this. There's so much here to kind of delve into psychologically, and that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to work out the kind of psychological profile of someone who does this. And again, it was like things like intense eye contact, the lack of personal space, and again, you feel it. You feel everything, and that's
lots of little red flags, isn't there?
Yeah, all the way through, and you see, you're like, get out. out, get out, get out. It's kind of almost like you see a horror film. This is a horror film, kind of a psychological one, but it's a horror film still. But yeah, it's him just kind of, you see him ignoring all the red flags. You're like, I know why you're staying, but I know you should leave. It's fantastic. I think you watched this as well for
did.
This.
I watched it on your recommendation. Yeah, essentially. So my mate Alex Hart, who I've had on the pod loads of times, he's seen more films than anyone I've ever met. And of your list, he was like, I've only seen 2 of those. And I was like, are you serious? Oh my God. So I recommended him come back to the 5 and Dime. I said, and I was like, I sent him the list and I was like, I've only got time probably to watch 1 or 2 of these. Which do you recommend? He was like, Creep. And I was like, you sure? He's like, just don't look up anything about it. And I was like, okay. So I went in there blind. I'm so glad I did. And it's as you say, this is exactly why I like small cast films. This is 1 or 2 guys who had a specific idea and were just like, let's just do it how we want to do it. Let's not faff about with studio interference. We don't need that. We literally only need a video camera. That's it. We can figure it out. And I respect it so much for that, and it was thrilling. And like Duplass, I know him from a show called The League, which is a sitcom that in the UK basically wasn't anywhere because it's all about fantasy football. And one of the main co-stars in it, I can't remember his name, he got into a lot of hot water because one of the co-stars after the show finished in season 7, he'd been lying his entire life because he claimed that he was a survivor of 9/11 and he was in the towers when he was not even in the same state, I think.
Fucking hell.
And you just go, what a piece of shit. And so that's why I think The League is somewhat kind of got, not quite buried, but there's people like Jason Mantzoukas.
Yes.
Who I adore. People know him from Brooklyn Nine and Big Mouth, things like that. He's in The League. Andre something or other, a bold chap with a gap in his teeth. He's in The League. Mark Duplass, he's in The League. Nick Kroll, he's in The League. So you get 7 seasons of these people and it's almost purely improv and they're all just being horrible to each other, but they're all mates. It's all about like dares and like, it's like, oh, we do fantasy league. And then every week, whoever's in the bottom has to do like a forfeit. And then someone in the top gets something. But it's that, and it gets more and more extreme. And it's basically just a group of mates who are just using any excuse to just rip on each other and be horrible to each other. And because so much of it is improv, and Mark Duplass is like the kind of main driver of that, it works so well, and it's such an underrated sitcom. I'd really recommend it to everyone. I have no enjoyment of any type of football, American or English, or fantasy sports. No shade on anyone who likes that stuff. It's just not my jam. But that show, knowing nothing about fantasy football, really, really like that. So when I saw Duplass was in it, I was like, I love this guy. He's not in that much because The League was like a 7-year thing, and so obviously
he was kind of part of the kind of mumblecore movement with like Greta Gerwig and stuff. Very like indie kind of those kind of films. Again, he tends to kind of go towards the kind of weird or the kind of comedy of the kind of indie stuff, and this is very much in there. Good. He is so good.
Everything he does, and he's passionate, which I think comes across in Creep, because I think that, you know, without spoiling what happens, what I will say is, what it feels like the film ends about halfway through.
Yes,
and I'm like, oh, and then it just does a really I won't say what happens, but it does a really minor thing, almost like a zoom out, and you're like, oh, okay, there's another layer to this. And I think even with what me and Dan have said about this film, if you haven't seen it, don't look any more into Creep
just
or
watch
anything. As Dan said, it's on Netflix, like 75 minutes long.
Yeah,
it's really interesting. It's thrilling. It's interesting, and it's maybe not fun, but it does have
there's a sense
light
of fun,
elements.
I'd say.
I'd say
because there is like this, like, you know, what's his name? Director of Get Out. What's his name? Jordan Peele.
Oh, Jordan Peele.
You know, he says there's a lot of links to comedy and horror because you're trying to get that outburst of kind of emotion.
Unexpected.
Yeah, the fear, like the scream or the laugh, you know, it's the timing of them, very specific. So I think you'll find a lot of comedians are actually really good at horror, and I think Duplass this is a masterclass in kind of not only like improv acting, but just acting in general, and again just pulling you in, even though like you're not supposed to like him, but you are, but you're not, but you are, but you're not. And again, a bit like Cloverfield Lane, you're constantly kind of, you know, on tenterhooks, you're questioning everything, like, is he this bad? Is he okay? Is he just a bit touched? You know, what is going on? And again, it keeps you guessing throughout the entire film.
I think Creep and Cloverfield Lane work as a great double feature.
Oh yeah.
I think if you watch Creep and then 10 Cloverfield, I think that would make such a great like isolation combination, because realistically, I mean, 10 Cloverfield, there's the 3 main actors. There's one other human character you see in it very briefly. It's near the key scene that you mentioned. And the only other actor in it is Bradley Cooper's voice right at the start.
Oh, was that
Mary
Bradley
Elizabeth
Cooper?
Winstead.
I didn't know that.
He just did I think he's just friends with Dan Trachtenberg, and he was like, I can do a little fun cameo for you. But like, and in Creep is literally 2. And I think maybe there's a third because there's a voice on the phone.
Yeah, you are correct. There's a voice on the phone in this one as well. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like both of the films very minimal, knew exactly what they wanted to do, constantly questioning things, and it's really a look into how much are you going to ignore of red flags because you're trying to be polite or a good person or what.
Yeah.
And I just think there's in Sherlock, BBC Sherlock, my with Benedict Cumberbatch, my favorite TV show of all time. In series 3, episode 3, the character it's Mads Mikkelsen's brother, actually, Lars Mikkelsen, who voices Thrawn in Star Wars and things.
Oh.
He plays like a baddie in it, and he basically says that there's one point where he walks into Sherlock's home and he just pisses right in the fireplace while talking to Sherlock, and he says, "I love you, British, because you would literally let someone piss on your floor and you won't say anything just to be polite." And that, when I heard that, when it first came out, I was like, the amount of situations I've been in where I really don't want to be there anymore, or I feel like red flags are coming up. Maybe this person shouldn't be in my house. Maybe I shouldn't be at this house party. Something, but you are so worried about being impolite, like the amount of times. And I think we're very privileged as men to be able to say that.
Sure.
And I think women feel this tenfold because if a woman is perceived as being impolite in a situation with a red flag person, there's not only a scare element that we would have, but there's a much greater feeling of fear in a lot of respects for a multitude of reasons. So it's like politeness when it comes to horror, like the dynamic of that, I think, is so clever and so kind of scary when you present that mirror. So I really like that about both of those films.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's so fun. I feel like I want to watch the sequel again. I don't think it was.
I heard the sequel's as almost as good. It's rated pretty much the same.
I think I remember liking it, but just not quite as much. But it's again, it's slightly different. It's a slightly different animal. But I will be checking out the Creep tapes as well.
I'm definitely intrigued. I want to watch the second one.
Yeah,
and I want to watch.
I'm on. Like that's probably the next thing I'll watch is the Creep 2 and Creep tapes. But yeah, it's a whole franchise. So clearly this did well. I think it made quite a bit of money. I think people found it on Netflix as well. And then again, a sequel came out, and then even now, like 10 years later, we're getting another kind of mini series type thing.
But it shows they didn't rush it.
Exactly.
Milk it in air quotes.
No,
it's not a studio getting behind a franchise and trying to milk it for what it's worth. It's two people who just made something really cool, and lots of people liked it. And they're like, "Oh, we can make another one," and everyone basically goes, "Yeah, it's different, but it's pretty much as good as or close to the original." And then I think that came out 2017, and then 7 years later they've made the series, which I'm very interested by. I won't say what the premise is, but again, don't look up anything if you haven't.
No, exactly.
Just go.
Don't look up any of them.
So interested,
but
interested by it all.
Yeah, it's just. Again, and I think there is a lot of humor to it. I think it's disturbing, but also I think it's quite funny as well, like darkly funny. Just check it out. I think it's superb. Right. What's your next one, Mike?
So my number 2. So these are ones I've been a bit more secretive about. So this film, in fact, 10 Cloverfield Lane, this film, and also my top pick, I all have on Blu-ray Steelbook. So I adore these. I've only got probably about 30 films on Blu-ray Steelbook. Probably 20 that aren't Marvel films and stuff, but I only get them when I love them. Now, this film I think it's in my top 10 of the best films I've ever seen. I think, so it's called Moon. It's directed by Duncan Jones, who, fun bit of trivia, he's David Bowie's nephew, and he directed a film called Source Code of Jake Gyllenhaal that I really like. I don't think it's phenomenal, but I do quite like it. And he also directed Warcraft, which was the World of Warcraft film that came out a while ago, that seemingly got quite slated. I saw it at the cinema, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And then it seems to have kind of got a bit more of a following after. I think a lot of people who really were into Warcraft didn't like it as much. I have no connections to World of Warcraft or Warcraft, so I quite liked that film, but I don't think he's done much since because I think that film cost a lot of money. But this film Moon, so
I will say, Mike, it's not his nephew, it's his son. So it's David Bowie's son.
Oh my god! Well, thank you for looking that up and correcting me.
Yeah, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's his son because he was known as Zowie Bowie originally.
Oh, okay. Well, I can see why his name is now Duncan Jones. Well, thank you for correcting that. Well, yeah, so
no worries.
Connection to David Bowie, good fun there. But so this film has 2 actors in. Okay, there's one actor I'm going to talk a lot about. There's one actor I'm only going to mention his name, and that's all you're going to get, which is he's is called Kevin Spacey. Enough said. He voices a robot in it. There's some films I find that do get ruined a bit now because of Kevin Spacey being, a horrible piece of shit.
I went to see him in a play years ago. I was in the same building as him because I loved him as an actor that much. I went down to London, went to see. He owned the Bristol Old Vic. I don't think he owns it anymore, but I think it was like Misbegotten by Moonlight or something. I can't remember what the fucking show was called, but yeah,
it's annoying, isn't it? Because he was such a phenomenal actor, but. Unfortunately, especially when you watch things like American Beauty and you're like, oh God. But fortunately in this film, he plays a robot and he's just a voice of this robot. And I do not find you even have to think about him at all when this film is on. But it's not about him at all. He's just almost a character for the main actor to bounce off of, which is Sam Rockwell, who I believe Sam Rockwell is in the top 3 greatest actors of all. Well, I don't know about all time because I've not seen enough films to say that, but of the last sort of couple of decades. I have not seen a film I've not enjoyed Sam Rockwell in. I've seen some films that aren't phenomenal by themselves. Glory Days is a film that I talk about back to the filmography because that's Matthew McConaughey in it. I won't talk about it a lot here, but it's not phenomenal. But pretty much everything I've seen Sam Rockwell in, he really is interesting. He pushes the boundaries of acting. There's a film called Gentlemen Broncos. Have you ever seen that?
I have not, no.
It's really weird. No one's heard of it or seen it. It's made by the person who made Napoleon Dynamite. It's nothing to do with that. It's a really interesting film about a kid who writes a book and then it kind of gets plagiarized by an adult, and then what you see is their story as in the real world of them kind of vying for who actually is who owns the story, but at the same time you get each of them kind of reading their version of the story to a group of people for one reason or another. And Sam Rockwell in that film plays the main character, and they're the way each person has like written their own of the same story, completely different stories, but it started as the same idea, and it's so clever. And the way he acts it, one's like a really overly camp, over dramatic, like 60s campy sci-fi, and the other's like an edgy, modern day kind of action hero. And Sam Rockwell plays the same, like these two characters, and the way he does it is so excellent. And everything I've seen Sam Rockwell in, I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I love that film, even though no one else likes it, but I love Sam Rockwell in that. But Moon in itself, I can't really talk about the plot, which is why I'm gushing about Sam Rockwell, because this is another one of those films which is the less you know about it, the better. But the whole premise is essentially, it's about a man who's working by himself on the moon on a specific type of station. I think it's like a solar farm or something. And essentially his station essentially provides a huge amount of resources or power to Earth. It's set in the not too distant future, but he's basically in the last I think he's in the last week or two, and then he gets to go home and see his family, who he's been video calling for a huge amount of time. And then essentially there's an accident of some sort, and then he goes to check out the accident. And then some really peculiar things start to kind of come from that. And I just think, again, the less you know about the film, the better. But Sam Rockwell in this film is so, so good that he's so multifaceted. You hear about the behind the scenes stuff of how he dealt with certain scenes, and it makes it even more impressive. And he is really passionate about this film. He did it as like a passion project, him and Duncan Jones. It's, it's got threads about corporate greed and new technology, but it's really about isolation and what one man will do to support his family, in essence, and the steps he'll go to get through it so he can get to the end, so he can go home. There's really emotional scenes where he's just talking to, like, Gertie is the name of the He Who Shall Not Be Named's robot character. And there's points where he just says, I just want to go home. He's like, I can't. He's like, there's a scene in this particular way he's just crying and he's just saying, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And I'm like, it's so emotional. I feel like you could do sort of the Blake Barles special and put lots of different lenses over this. And I think the queer lens, you could have a whole podcast, especially with certain things that happen in the film that I don't want to say in this podcast. There's certain things that happen in the film that I think if you looked at that with an LGBTQ plus lens, you could have such an interesting conversation about it. But I went into the film not knowing much about it, and I just came out going, that was a masterclass in acting. It was a masterclass in mystery and storytelling and how you can make a sci-fi film look phenomenal. I know it was kind of a big budget-ish film, but it's not, for me, it feels like an indie film, but really the special effects are really just some in-between stuff, but really all the meat of it happens in like one or two parts.
It's got indie sensibilities. It's got an indie feel. It's like, I don't know, like The Killers. Like they're an indie band, but maybe not really. But yeah, I know what you mean. It has that vibe, that aesthetic. I remember watching this. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I remember the main kind of crux of it, but I do remember it being quite humorous and quite poignant. As well.
At points, it's very much like
and it's like oh shit, yeah. But I remember that going like he can, like you said, it's multifaceted, not only in his performance, but again for other reasons as well. But I won't spoil. But yeah, I think you're right. I think he is a phenomenal actor. Again, I think I've not kind of seen him in a lot. I'll be honest. I love him as. I think he's one of the best things in Iron Man 2, however you feel about that film.
100%.
Justin Hammer is the best thing in it. I remember seeing... I've not seen Green Mile, no.
Well, I bet that's on yours and Andy's list, isn't it?
It probably is. Well, it's on my list. Andy's probably seen it.
3 hours and 10 minutes long. It's the next film on mine and Megan's Tom Hanks rewatch.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a phenomenal movie, and Rockwell's amazing in it. But that
I like Michael Clark Duncan as well. And
he's so sad when he passed. But like Sam Rockwell in Green Mile, Sam Rockwell, that was kind of the film that launched him in a lot of ways. I
did see there was a film called Choke, which actually is directed by Agent Coulson from Marvel, and it's written by somebody who's written I think a book, or the book was based on another film, but this was also based on the book, and it's about sex addiction, and it's kind of funny and again kind of weird and kind of sad and all of those things, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Thought it was something a bit different, something a bit kooky and weird to watch, but yeah, I quite enjoyed it. But yeah, it's very odd, very kind of off kilter, but again, that kind of goes with what he likes to do.
He always challenges. He does like the odd bigger budget thing like Marvel, because realistically it's to make money, which I'm fine with, because the amount of films that you've probably never heard of that he's been in, like Gentleman Broncos, no one has seen that film, not even heard of it, and like I would say look into Sam Rockwell's back catalogue, because he is one of my absolute favourites.
I wouldn't watch a film called Clown House. I will say nothing more about that film, but don't watch Clown House.
If you tell me not to watch a film, I'm definitely not going to watch it.
It's not what's on screen; it's what happened behind the scenes. Okay. Yeah, it's
much like
he is in it. I know he's in it. He plays like a bully or something. But it's a creepy film about clowns going for this young boy. But yeah, it's the stuff behind the scenes which is far more disturbing and problematic. But yeah, if I told you the director's name, you might know who I'm talking about. And
I think I'll be all right. I think I'll just
leave that one.
I won't think any more about Clown House.
Don't think about Clown House.
But friends. No. Moon, phenomenal.
Yeah.
And also, if you want something weird and different as indie-ish, and if you like things like Napoleon Dynamite, Gentleman Broncos.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Or Choke. Give Choke a go. Oh, no, that sounds... Well, I mean, I've seen it, but I would like to revisit it because I'm struggling to remember a lot.
I think on the rewatch, because I've only seen it, I think this is the third time I watched it, because I think I watched the cinema and then I bought it straight after and shown a friend of mine, and then I watched it since. So I had... the plot points that we're subtly leading on, but we're not telling the audience about. I remember those bits, and I was like, no, there's more to the film because I remember enjoying it so much. And then when you watch it, I think when you already know where it's kind of going, and you can pay attention to the subtleties, I think it's one of those films that on the rewatch it still works, even though some of the major plot points are no longer surprises.
Okay,
but yeah.
Well, since we're here and our Disney discussion cohorts are not, why don't I talk about a Disney film? So
the trailer of this was quite interesting.
Yeah, bit different. So this is a film that's not available on Disney Plus because I like to do stuff that Disney doesn't want to show. So this is called Never Cry Wolf, and it stars Charles Martin Smith, who I've talked a lot about in the last year or so. He was in Starman, and he was also the director of Trick or Treat, 1986. And this is basically about it's a factual story. It's about a man who studied wolves in Alaska because there was basically a virus or something, or there was a rumor that the wolves were killing off the caribou, so all the deers and stuff in Alaska, and that's why there was lower numbers. So this gentleman was sent out there to study, and he was sent out there for, I think, better part of a year, I think, or longer, maybe 2 or several. And it's basically about a man who is ill-prepared for going into the harsh reality and wildlife and nature of Alaska. And he initially struggles and he brings way too much shit, buys too much beer, takes that with him, and goes and is in like the absolute arse end of nowhere, in the middle of the kind of wherever, and he has to survive and figure out and find the wolves and study them and figure out what's going on. Now, the film starts off, and it is kind of more of a kind of docudrama. Imagine if like a David Attenborough documentary had a kind of narrative. So it's much more about, you know, these gorgeous vistas and these gorgeous kind of the cinematography of, you know, again, they don't use a lot of kind of helicopter shots. They're in there, they're doing it. Charles Martin Smith is the only character in this film for the majority of the film, and he was in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, shot on location, and he was the only person there for 4 months. Like, he went through it. There are scenes in this film where he's like outrunning wolves, and he's running naked with the caribou for real. Like,
I saw that in the trailer, and I was like, this film looks too old for this to not be real.
Yeah, and that is real. That he did that, and they spent, I think it was like, took 20 hours a day for a month to film that scene, that one scene where he's butt-ass naked in the wilderness. He got pneumonia. The director got pneumonia. Like, they were not prepared for how much this film was going to kick their ass. But again, like, Charles Martin Smith actually moved out there. He lives out there, I believe, still. He fell in love with everything about this area. And Charles Martin Smith was directly kind of linked, and he was writing it. It was in he was a producer, I think, on it. Like, he lived this. It wasn't like, it was something that he lived as opposed to like was acting. And he came up with the kind of there's a voiceover, there's a narration for most of it that kind of fills in the holes. But again, it's kind of, it almost doesn't need to be there, because this story is so kind of, it's weird. It starts off from a very scientific, very factual basis, like, you know, you and me when we were younger, but it kind of drifts into kind of this almost supernatural, mystical thing where he meets these Inuit people, these 2 Inuit men who help him and, you know, teach him how to cook and catch things and kind of assist him with living out there, which they don't have to do. And they kind of learn from each other and respect each other. It's really just a beautiful film. You know, the cinematography, they had a handler of wolves there, because all the wolves that they used were trained but also they're still like wolves at the end of the day, you know, and they had to like hold his chicken above the camera to get their like interest. The crew and the cast couldn't look them in the eye, because that's like a dominance thing. If you do that, they may attack you, may kill you. You know, it's very risky kind of filmmaking, and there's a few bits of this which are kind of fictionalized, but for the most part, you know, it really happened, and it really, you know, not only the person who, I think it was his son wrote the book, or the guy wrote the book about himself, I can't remember, but that study that happened changed what we know about wolves forever. So it's a very important kind of, you know, not geological, that's rocks, isn't it? Whatever the term is, kind of
evolutionary biology.
Yeah, kind of whatever the term is, animal behavioral science, or whatever you want to call it. But it changed almost everything we know about wolves in general. And it's this wonderful kind of, it's almost like they're neighbors. They become kind of friends with the wolves, but they kind of respect the boundaries and everything. There's a lot of humor again. There's a lot of, you know, sadness, action, you name it, and kind of a lot of kind of mysticism and thinking about, you know, man's inhumanity to man and what he's doing to nature and the world around him. But yeah, it's a gorgeous film. Again, available in full on YouTube.
Why is it not on Disney Plus out of interest?
I guess
Do you
no.
know?
I don't have a reason. I think
wondered, because
Disney,
there's certain films which are like, oh, one specific scene's problematic or something. Or
no, I don't. I think the only thing is that he runs around with his arse out. I think you may, if you're not careful, you might see a bit of dick as well.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is it release the dongs, and that's why they haven't? Because I was just thinking.
I mean, it's quite far. I think what happened was as well, because we were talking about like Ron Miller during our Disney discussions and Touchstone and what that became, and I think this was the first film where they were like, we're kind of veering into more kind of adult territory and adult stuff.
Right.
So I think this is one of the last kind of those films with the Disney label. But again, they've got all sorts of stuff on there now with all sorts of worse things.
Oh, yeah.
Questionable material. And then, and like some of the early Disney films, they would absolutely not put on there. But I don't think it's because it's banned. I think just probably not enough people are watching it and they need the bandwidth or the server room. They took Willow off 2 weeks after it came out.
I know. So. Yeah, they've now announced a physical release of that, but I'm like, oh, that's just scared me a bit. I'm like, there's nothing problematic. You just took it off because people didn't like it, and I'm like, that's dangerous.
Scary. Again, we're becoming a world of lost media. So yeah, I genuinely, I'm not like a nature watcher of documentaries or something, but I really got invested in this, and it surprised me how beautiful and stunning. And again, there's not much dialogue, there's not much kind of, I don't know, there's still a fair bit of character and development and stuff, but it's basically about the beauty and savagery of the wilderness and what people will do to survive and how it affects you and how you can learn and grow, and you're still part of that kind of ancient kind of system of savagery that we're all unfortunately kind of part of. So I thought it's a gorgeous film. Highly recommend.
Yeah, I saw the trailer. Again, I would say for anyone listening, watch the trailers of all of our films, except I would say don't watch 10 Cloverfield Lane's trailer and don't watch Creep's trailer.
Yes.
I'd say
I agree.
Pretty much maybe not Moon. I can't remember the trailer of Moon. But so maybe not this, but I would say that the trailer of this definitely intrigued me. I did. I think I watched it when you first sent me the list a while ago.
Yeah. I think I was just watching it generally. Kind of, because I think we were going to do this earlier on, but it didn't really happen. And I think I was just kind of watching. I was like, it's actually pretty good. And then I realized it was a Disney thing, and I sent it in our message group. I was like, oh, it's a Disney film.
Well, that's it. And it's one of those, because if I hadn't kind of got caught up trying to decide between Lock Buried and Phone Booth, then I think this was going to be the next film I was actually going to watch. Yeah. But yeah, I'd say watch the trailer. It really shows, you get to see a little bit of that scene where he's running with the caribou. And that scene in particular, it really interested me.
Yeah, it's powerful. All of it is very powerful. I think he's an actor that when I was listening to the Starman commentary for the DVD, Jeff Bridges says how powerful the film is. He says, I love working with Charles on this. Have you seen Never Cry Wolf? It's amazing. What he does in that is amazing. What an actor can do and what that production became is amazing. And I have to agree with Jeff Bridges on that.
Wise man.
Right. Is this your final one, Mike, I believe?
It's the finale, what everyone's been waiting
Final
for.
countdown. Here we go.
Indeed. So this film is directed and written by Alex Garland, who is the most underrated person working in Hollywood, in my opinion. I'd say Hollywood, it's more of an English kind of guy, but Alex Garland. So this film I'm talking about is Ex Machina. It's my favorite film of all time, as well as Trainspotting. They're my two favorite films ever. And funnily enough, there's a connection to Trainspotting because Alex Garland works closely with Danny Boyle on quite a few things. So Alex Garland wrote the screenplay for 28 Days Later. I believe he was a producer on 28 Weeks, I think. He wrote the Sunshine screenplay. He wrote the screenplay for Dread with Carl Urban. He wrote the book The Beach, the original book, that Danny Boyle then adapted into the film with DiCaprio. He wrote and directed Annihilation with Oscar Isaac and Natalie Portman shortly after this, which I enjoyed, but I was a bit underwhelmed by. I liked it, but I think because I'd seen this film, I was so blown away, nothing would compare. So I do want to rewatch it, but I know it's a bit weird, and I don't think Megan's going to enjoy it.
It is weird. So, it's definitely weird.
Very weird. Very cool. Very cool visuals. But then recently he wrote and directed the film called Civil War, which is phenomenal. It's an amazing movie. Kirsten Dunst is probably one of her best roles I've ever seen her in. And Civil War is a film which only came out recently. It's people have probably seen the trailers, and they've probably seen the meme of Jesse Plemons where he says, "What kind of American are you?" And it's been changed into "What kind of Star Wars fan are you?" etc. etc. Civil War has a lot to say. And it's a really cool film about war journalism. But what happens if there's a civil war in America and you're like that? But Ex Machina, and Alex Garland's list of things, he's written for lots of video games and all kinds of other cool stuff as well. But he's worked with Danny Boyle, who obviously I love. And so Ex Machina, so it's a film where it's only got realistically, apart from the first minute of the film, it has 4 cast members in it, and one of the cast members has no dialogue. So the one with no dialogue is Sonoya Mizuno. there's a reason she hasn't got any dialogue, and that's part of the film, so you're going to have to watch and find out. But the main actors, you've got Oscar Isaac, who I think, as well as Sam Rockwell, are the two. I think Sam Rockwell, James McAvoy, and Oscar Isaac are the three best working actors in the last 20 years. DiCaprio is kind of an exception. I think because DiCaprio cherry picks his roles so much that it's easier for him to only land great roles. Also, he does loads of Scorsese. So, whereas Oscar Isaac, James McAvoy, and Sam Rockwell all take big risks. They're all in films that have not done well. They've all been in big films, like Marvel films, and etc. But they really commit to roles. They go full on, and there's never a time I've seen any of those three actors in a film and I've in any way doubted that character. I don't see them when I see Oscar Isaac in a role, apart from going, oh my God, Oscar Isaac for a second. After that, I'm in. I watch Moon Knight. He is Moon Knight. I watch Ex Machina. I can't remember the character's name in this, but he's that character. Anything I see Oscar Isaac in, he impresses me, even if I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the film. The other actors in it is Domhnall Gleeson, who plays Hux in the Star Wars sequel trilogy.
Very good actor. Very good actor.
Phenomenal. He's great. He's also in a film called...
I love that Black Mirror episode he's in with Hayley Atwell.
Yes, with the memory one.
Yeah,
where it's like
the robot.
Her husband's passed away. Yeah. I remember seeing him in that. Phenomenal. And also his dad is Brendan Gleeson, who's in Bruges with them. There's lots of connections. A lot of my films are cyclical because there's lots of connections to Martin McDonagh as well. He's one of my favourite directors. But so the third actor in this is Alicia Vikander, who, funny enough, played, because you mentioned Tomb Raider earlier, she plays Tomb Raider in the film Tomb Raider. And so the whole film is literally all just about AI. And this was before everyone was talking about AI. This actually, in my opinion, I think this film kind of reignited mainstream people talking about AI a bit before. You had in the 90s, the early 2000s, you had Skynet, Terminator, that kind of jazz. No one really spoke about it for a while. The internet was, the big flashy thing. And then obviously now no one can do anything without mentioning AI. But when Ex Machina came out, it kind of reignited the conversation. I think that was around the time where the talks of simulation theory started to gain a bit more traction again. And the reason... So this is one of my favorite films of all time. And the reason is because, in my view, this film doesn't step out wrong at all. The whole plot is literally, it's a guy, Domhnall Gleeson, he's working in a company. Everyone gets put into this ballot to go and see what this big secret project that the boss of the whole company is working on, and like a random island somewhere, completely isolated. He wins this thing, which is why in the first minute of the film there's a few people talking who are not important. And then he goes to the island, and the whole film is him in a facility with this massive corporate boss who's Oscar Isaac, who is clearly maybe not disturbed, but he's clearly a troubled man. And what happens is the secret project, this isn't a spoiler because it's literally, you can't see the film anywhere or poster without seeing a picture of this. But Alicia Vikander, she plays essentially an artificial intelligence robot. But unlike her, which is with Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix, which I've not seen, but I am due to, she has a physical body. She is there talking. And the majority of the film is conversations between Domhnall Gleeson and this AI robot, played by Alicia Vikander. And the whole film is you questioning what the motives are behind the corporate guy played by Oscar Isaac. That's where the film leads you. And I just think that, again, I won't spoil anything because I want everyone to watch this film. I think this is not only one of the best films ever made, I think it's one of the best sci-fi films ever made. I think it's the best AI film ever made. I think that it allows you to understand sympathy, but also have some concerns about things. And I think what this film does expertly is it shows really the things you should be worried about really are people more than anything. And I just think that there's so many scenes in this film that are done so well. There's so many, there's a couple of scenes of music and dancing that are specifically uncomfortable for specific reasons. And I think every actor in this, even Sonoya Mizuno, who again doesn't say a word, the role she plays is so underrated in this film. She's very important to the plot, but for reasons you don't necessarily pick up on the first watch through, she becomes a lot more of a clue. If you've never seen the film, keep your eye on her because she hints at what happens. But I've just not really seen any films like this. We see isolation films a bit like 10 Cloverfield, and you see sci-fi films, but I think for me, Moon and Ex Machina work so well because they're both high concept sci-fi films about isolation that are really, when you boil down to them, what makes us human. And the thing is with Moon is it's what makes you human when there's no one else around. And what Ex Machina is what makes you human when there's something that questions what being human and what being alive actually is. And I think that these two films, they work hand in hand for me, and the reason they're at my absolute top, and I've got them both on home release and things. I even bought the French steelbook of Ex Machina because at the time there wasn't one in the UK. I was so bent on getting it on steelbook, and it's a beautiful cover. But this is the one film that when I meet someone and they say they're into films, I pretty much always say, have you seen Ex Machina? And they go, and a lot of the time they have, because it's got a decent amount of traction, but a fair few people still haven't seen it. And I would say, if you genuinely said to me, Mike, I've never seen Star Wars and I've never seen Ex Machina, what should I watch? I will tell you Ex Machina. I genuinely think this film is an absolute triumph. And I think that, honestly, anyone here listening to this who has not seen Ex Machina is genuinely doing themselves a disservice. I'm so passionate about this film. I adore it. But yes, I won't say anything else about it. What did you think, Dan? Because I think you've seen this film, haven't you?
I'm with you, Mike. I bloody love it. I don't think it's probably one of my favorite films ever, but
which is fair.
But I think it fires on all cylinders. I think it's got a lot to say. There's so many layers. There's so much to dissect about it. The characters, their motivations, what they're not saying, what they are saying, how they're saying it, how human are you, and how, what is it to be human as well, as you were saying, how advanced is AI, or is the AI the danger, or is it the people using AI and how they're using it the issue? There's so much, and I think as time's gone on, it's only getting more and more relevant again.
I think it was made like 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it says a lot about kind of the world we live in, and there's kind of a feminist message as well within this as well, among many other things.
Well, the male gaze,
the misogyny and everything that's a big part. That was a big part I remembered when I watched it. A few years ago I did try and watch this again with my dad, but he wasn't into it, so we had to turn it off for whatever reason, I can't remember. But yeah, he wasn't buying it for what. But I was like, this is great, you should watch it. But this particular one, I'll be honest, when he lets me pick films, it's either one way, or it's going to be something he really likes or something he's not into at all. And I was like, it gets to a point where I'm like, why are you letting me pick? Because you're going to turn it off anyway. Just pick whatever you want and I'll just be here, and I might watch it. So yeah, no, I love it. Again, high concept sci-fi, lots of exploring again, ideas and what it is again to be human and the human condition and everything, which seems to be a theme throughout these films we talked about. So yeah, I highly recommend this one as well. Excellent, truly an excellent top pick. Couldn't recommend it enough. Like yourself, go and see it. Don't watch any trailers about it.
I remember the trailer. Unfortunately, it doesn't spoil anything, but I just think the less you know, the better.
I think so. I think there's a lot of kind of twists and turns again that I think spoiling it would ruin somewhat. Again, with a lot of these films, I think knowing more about them is going to affect your opinion of them. But yeah, great number one. So I'm going to very quickly go through my number one.
Another play adaptation I saw.
It was, sir, yes. And again, most of the cast return. This is directed by Norman Jewison, based on a play by Charles Fuller, who also wrote the screenplay for this, and stars Denzel Washington and the recently deceased David Harris, who was also in The Warriors, was in this, Patti LaBelle, David Alan Grier, Wings Hauser, and Robert Townsend. It is a story set in 1944 on a military base in the kind of south of America, and a black drill sergeant is murdered, and it is blamed on the Ku Klux Klan, I think, who have operated in the area. A black officer, I think is he a sergeant? It's a captain, sorry. He's a captain. So Captain Richard Davenport is sent to investigate. He is met with a lot of barriers in his investigation. He is not allowed to interview 2 white soldiers. He is everything is getting in the way of his investigation. He's meeting a lot of problems. The sergeants and higher ups, colonels and what have you, they think because he is a black man, he's not going to get the answers that he's looking for. They want it to be an open and shut case. They want to just put it to bed and not talk about it and just move on. But unfortunately, as the investigation goes on, we learn more about this drill sergeant. This drill sergeant is angry and is an alcoholic and has basically is a racist against black people as well as white people. And we learn that he has enemies, white and black. So it could be anybody who's killed him. But there are various kind of clues, and we learn through flashbacks, much like with the Five and Dime, what the character is about, who he was, what he did, and the kind of things he has done in the past. And it is a really, again, I'm not going to spoil it, I'm not going to spoil the details, but it is a very gripping murder mystery which has some excellent character. It's got an all-star black cast as well for a film back in, I want to say 1980, I can't remember, 1980 something. Let's say 1985, and it's a tour de force of performances from this all-black cast. Again, not all black cast, but mostly a black cast. Again, most of the actors returned, but it's a story that the director had real issue trying to get made. He loved the play, which was called a soldier's play, so they changed it to a soldier's story. And it really kind of gets into the weeds of American racism at the time and where the world was, and the fact that these black men want to fight in the war, but they're still not allowed to. They're still not allowed on the front lines. They are still having to train. And again, that's kind of freaking them out, and they're losing things, and they're being put down by this drill sergeant. Drill sergeant has fights with some of them and does some other really reprehensible things that affect everybody on that base. But the director really wanted to tell this story, really wanted to get this out there. I think he said it was important for America, it was important to discuss these kind of topics. And the film studios didn't want to make it. They basically just said, no, this kind of stuff, it divides people, it upsets people. We don't want it to be told. So the director said, I will take the bare minimum pay for being a director on this film, and I will shop this around. I will take the lowest budget imaginable because this story needs to be told. And he went out and he made this film, and again got all the cast back together. And again, it has a lot of twists and turns. Yeah, it is quite a dark subject matter, but there is levity, there is humor, there is light to it. There is some amazing music as well. There is some proper like New Orleans-y kind of style, kind of Louisiana style kind of music. Phenomenal, just on every level. And yeah, lots of twists and turns. You're never quite sure who's doing what or who could be the culprit, who murdered him. Was it several people? Was it white people? Was it black people? Who knows? Was it the Ku Klux Klan? Unlikely. But I think it's a really powerful story, and it's a kind of a topic, which is black on black racism, that probably doesn't get talked about as much as you would think.
Yeah, because I saw the trailer of this film, and I thought I got 12 Angry Men vibes in a really good way.
Yeah.
Which is, it's essentially a murder that people want to be an open and shut case. They just want to push it off their desks and not think about it too much. But one person's like, no, something isn't right here. We need to look into this more. I don't want someone who's innocent to be found guilty, or for, due course, the judiciary system to not work. Let's spend time on this. And I know 12 Angry Men, we'll get into that because I know people have mentioned it in the comments and stuff, but I love that film. I hadn't seen it until I think this year.
Fantastic.
Phenomenal. It's probably one of the best films ever made. It's just because it's so hard to fault, but it's just, again, it's very isolated. It's one story, just script expert. So when I saw this, actually, obviously when I watched the trailers for Never Cry Wolf, A Soldier Story, and Fallen Angels, and all of them did intrigue me for completely different reasons. Fallen Angels, I was like, this is cool and nuts and crazy, and Eastern cinema are going crazy. I love that. Then Never Cry Wolf was like, oh, this feels like quite a, as you said, like documentary, maybe spiritual, kind of getting into kind of, one man's kind of relationship with nature in a lot of ways. And then Soldier Story, I would recommend people watch the trailer of this because I have no idea. I don't think the trailer gives any hints to who's what. I just got the trailer. In the trailer, it mentions that the person who was murdered, he says a couple of slurs.
Yeah.
So he's like, he does mention about hardworking this and hardworking that, but not hardworking enough, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like, even watching the trailer, I was like, this looks like I can see what kind of film this is going to be, but it's the kind of film that grips me. There's a film called Detroit, which I hugely recommend.
Catherine Bigelow.
Yeah, oh, of course, yeah. And, starring Will Poulter and John Boyega. And that film based in the Detroit riots. And when it, as the film starts to wrap up, then you get the court case towards the end. And it's like, that film made me so angry. And I showed it to Megan and she was just so angry. And I was like, this is what the world is like, unfortunately.
That's good though. That's what it wants.
That's what I want
to do.
100%.
Talked
That's
about
the
it on
vibe I get from this.
Yeah, talked about it on the last podcast in length, in full. That's exactly, she's a provocateur. Like Catherine Bigelow wants you to feel things. Even if it's anger, that means she's done her job. And again,
you should feel angry about something.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I said on the podcast. She likes to hold up a mirror. You can't be angry at the mirror. It's good that you're angry. If you were apathetic to it, then you've got an issue. Then there's a problem.
100%.
So yeah, this film kind of tackles those issues, and again, like the prejudice and the kind of like, we can't, if we talk about this or if we acknowledge this, that a white guy has killed a black guy or a black guy has killed a white guy, this could tear this base apart. Like we'd have the black soldiers fighting the white soldiers, and it's like. And again, this is kind of similar to what I was exploring and talking about in Strange Days as well. That kind of topic. And yeah, I think it's a great film. Again, like Denzel's great, David Alan Grier's great. All of the actors are absolutely nailing it. I think the guy who plays the drill sergeant is phenomenal in this. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but he is incredible. I think he was the voiceover artist for a lot of like blaxploitation trailers because I recognize the voice. But again, a lot of the actors did return from the play version. Again, they've lived these roles, and they've just phenomenal. And again, so much to say, so much. And again, it's before everything was woke, it is saying something. It's saying something that's really powerful and still very relevant. And it was, 25, almost 30 years ago or more. It's a powerful film, and I'm so glad the director went to those lengths to make sure that this story was told and that these actors got the opportunity to do their best. And again, it's a very early Denzel Washington role, and you can see where he's going to go from here.
I'm very interested. It's definitely one that's hit my list. My friend Alex, when I mentioned him this list, he said, I was at the Soldier Story from this time, this era, and I was like, yeah, and he was like, oh, that's a good one. He's like, be prepared. Yeah. It's not an easy watch.
No, it's not.
In a sense, it's emotional.
Yeah.
But he said it was a good one. So, yeah, very excited about watching a couple of the films that I haven't seen of yours.
Amazing. Right. Well, that's both of our top fives. I wonder if Jack managed to guess all of ours, because he said...
A lot of people, I had to keep my mouth shut because a lot of people are pretty close with some of mine.
I was like, you know what? I might not post on Instagram what I'm watching tonight. I might not post on, I might just be
I've been doing that.
Not to give it all away.
I was not posting certain things. Yes.
Or I might post certain things, but I wasn't going to include them.
Yeah, exactly.
Tricky.
I was going to quickly say honourable mentions.
Yes.
Just because I want to get into the comments.
Sure.
But so there's three films that are in the honourable mentions of mine, which I had considered. So one is I Am Legend, which I know you haven't seen, but you know the ending. So that's a part. I would still recommend it, but it's not phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good movie, and it's got a lot to say, and it is emotional. But for me, it fell in the same camp of Phone Booth for me, which is... It is really only about one or two people, but it feels very big budget.
Yeah.
It feels like it's made by a big studio. It has lots of massive centerpieces. And I felt like, although it does have a lot of common themes to some of these other films, for me, I was like, it's not different enough to kind of stand out in these lists. So that's why I didn't choose that. Another film I didn't choose was Memento by Christopher Nolan. Phenomenal film. I just feel like this is going to make me sound like a douchebag. It feels like it's an easy choice. I would say that the majority of people, if you say think of an amazing film with not a lot of cast, a lot of people are going to see Memento.
I think so.
You know, it's a huge indie film in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like the most popular. It's a film that either the masses haven't seen but they've heard of, or everyone who's like considers themselves a film buff has definitely seen Memento. As soon as you kind of if you're like my age and you get into movies, and you got into movies around the time that like Dark Knight came out,
Memento.
You go back, you go, let's watch all the Chris Nolan films. Oh, there's Memento. Not heard much about that, and you go, oh, I've not heard much, because you can't say anything about Memento, and there's not really much. There would be a lot to talk about if we did a whole podcast on it, because you could break down everything. Sure. But in passing, I'm like, pretty much everyone who's listening to this has probably seen Memento. It's not as different as some of the films I chose. And although I probably would argue it's better than certain films I maybe not better, but, you know, it's an undeniably amazing film. I just thought pretty much everyone's seen it. So it's kind of one of those. And the other film I didn't choose is 127 Hours. Again, connection to Danny Boyle. Thought the film was phenomenal. Unfortunately, it stars James Franco, who's a piece of shit. And it's just him.
Yeah.
And although I think he does do well in it, I didn't want to talk about it and glorify him, because I'm just like, unfortunately, as well as James Franco did, as well as Danny Boyle did, James Franco's a piece of shit, and I don't really want to talk about that. So I don't know if you had a couple of honorable mentions.
I had a whole 5, I've decided, of honorable mentions. So I was going to do Coherence, and the reason I didn't is because the actor in question in the film plays a alcoholic, violent, mentally kind of has a violent outset, a mental kind of conditioning or whatever, and he's an actor from a TV show, which happens to be Nicholas Brendan, who recently I learned is quite physically abusive to women and has substance abuse issues. I love that film. I think it is an indie film that takes us. I think you'd love it. Genuinely, I think you'd love it. It's about your choices you picked today. I think it's one you'd love, and it kind of plays with the kind of multiverse idea while, you know, before it was played out, but while on an indie budget, and it does it phenomenally, and in such a kind of disconcerting and you know, terrifying manner. I think you'd love it. It's very much a people movie, but there's a lot of elements to it which I think you'd really enjoy. But yeah, the reason I didn't include it is because I learned those things, and I think a lot of the people who do know about him kind of tend to kind of focus on Joss Whedon, but then I learned all this, and I was like, wow, he's probably worse, it sounds like. But yeah, there's a video I can tag if people want to watch it, but it's quite a long one, but the Nicholas Brendan stuff is all at the end. But yeah, so sorry to ruin another thing for somebody else, but yeah, he's bad as well. So we had the Boys in the Band, which is directed by one of my favorite directors, William Friedkin. I've talked a lot about him, and it's basically a snapshot of the late 60s gay scene. It's a phenomenal play. Some people don't think it's particularly good. I think some people of the LGBTQIA+ persuasion have issues with it, and that's fair enough. But I thought it was great. I thought the performances were great, and again, it's like, you know, it's the gay scene before the AIDS epidemic as well, which is like, you know, unheard of to see a film in 1970 like about entirely gay characters played by gay actors, and sadly most of those men did lose their lives during the AIDS epidemic, but they are all so incredible in that film, and again shot in very interesting way. One location based on a play, you know, it just falls into the category that we've been talking about. Highly recommend. I'd watch it just out of respect for those actors. It was remade recently for Netflix, and again they cast almost entirely gay actors, I believe, or bi actors in those roles as well, and again they set that in the 70s. Blackwater, which is an Australian film, low budget Australian film about 3 people who get stranded and they are stuck in a tree, and there's an alligator or crocodile trying to eat them. Again, very low budget, but really knows how to showcase that alligator or crocodile. I think it's an alligator. I'm not entirely sure, but one of those. One of them. You know, they're all the same.
It's not a caiman, so it's just one of the other two. It's
fine. One of them. But yeah, it's really good, really kind of gripping, and again, very short and sweet and satisfying. You know, it's not got like a really bad CGI, you know, animal or anything. It's done really, really well and very tense and very gripping. There was a sequel recently, I think, came out to it. But yeah, it came out originally in 2007. Highly recommend. Brief Encounter, the famous kind of romance film with, I think is it David Lean? I want to say David Lean. But yeah, just kind of where those tragic romance stories come from. This is kind of the cinematic origin story of that. Like, you don't get your tragic love stories without Brief Encounter. And again, very, very low, kind of, not low budget, but very kind of, it's a low stakes story technically, but it feels much more powerful than you would think. Love that one. And an Alfred Hitchcock film called Lifeboat from 1944. This is written by John Steinbeck, the writer of Mice and Men and the Grapes of Wrath.
I was going to say, I recognise that from English literature class.
Yeah, you do. So the playwright wrote this, and it's basically all about people who have survived being... This is 1944, by the way, and it's a film about them their ship being blown up by Nazis, and they're surviving on a lifeboat. And you've got a German soldier on there, you've got a black man, you've got several women, a woman whose baby has died in her arms, and she's having to deal with that. It's incredible, all set on this lifeboat. It's brilliant, really, really good. I think it might be on YouTube. I think I watched it on YouTube, so check that out. Just superb film. Again, it's Hitchcock. What can I say? It's excellent. Steinbeck, the writing is great. Just really, really good. Highly recommend.
I do want to do at some point a project of some sort. I do want to try and do like a Alfred Hitchcock full rewatch. I just watch all his movies because I've only seen.
There's a lot.
Yeah, I know, and there's a lot of shit as well. I've heard.
Yeah, like
I've watched because I only watched Psycho recently. I did that obviously Afterthoughts, which was all right. But The Birds was the first one I saw of his, and I think that's a cracking film.
Yeah, it's great.
It's the one film in all of history that I'm like, why has no one remade this and like actually made it good? If you got Jordan Peele or someone who's like a talented thriller director who's not going to glorify it, who uses the flapping of the wings expertly, because the only reason you need to remake it is because you watch it now and the birds look like shit.
Yeah,
because they're paper mache, and it just, there's one or two scenes where you see a group of birds and you're like, it just completely takes me out of it. Excluding
I get it.
When there's that scene where she hears a flapping and she opens the hotel room door and there's a guy there with his eyes pecked out, I was like, that's horror. That for me, when I only watched that when I was
I like the scene where it's the climbing frame and then she keeps turning around, she turns back, there's more and more birds there each time.
Exactly. That kind of thing. I want subtlety. I want someone to remake that film, but not someone who's like making Texas Chainsaw Massacre 18. You know what I mean? Like, I want someone who's actually invested in it in a way.
No, I agree. I think there was a sequel called Land's End, which I heard is shit. And I mean, Birdemic could be a remake. You could consider that a remake.
Yeah, that's the problem. I was thinking of like, that's the problem I did think of, you know, that there's Schitt's Creek, which is a great sitcom, and that's got like The Crow to the Crowing or something. And whenever I mention to people The Birds, people always say, "Oh, like Schitt's Creek, like the birds, like the crowing," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, hopefully not that." But yeah,
that's just all the Crow sequels, I think. The Crow, the Crowing. But yeah, no, I'm up for that. You let me know. I'll watch some Hitchcock films with you. I think
cool.
I think one of the things I like about Hitchcock is you watch it and you're like, "Where's the famous bit in this? Well, when does it become?" Because it always starts off and it's a totally different movie. Like The Birds is like a romantic comedy until she gets to the halfway point, and then it's all about the bird war. And then Psycho's the same. It's all about this kind of woman who's stealing money from a boss, and the thrill of that. She's going to get caught, and then she just happens to stay at this hotel, and then that story starts. The Psycho Norman Bates thing starts.
I was surprised how soon the shower scene is in that film. It's like half an hour, and then I was like, I thought this was at the end.
No,
because I just didn't know.
Yeah, because you think that she's going to, because she's the big star at the time, you think she's going to carry on throughout the film, but no, she's killed off at the beginning. Spoilers for Psycho, sorry. Sorry if you haven't seen that. So yeah, let's get on to the listener comments. There are quite a few. So Max Byrne, this is his 5. The Room, Glengarry Glen Ross, Cube, Rope, which is an Alfred Hitchcock, and Time Bandits, the ultimate small cast. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
because they're all little people. We get it, Max. We get it. Well done. Well done. You've lampooned me. You lampooned me.
I know. I have seen some of these comments, but I try to avoid them a little bit because I don't want to start commenting because I'll give stuff away.
Yeah.
But
Go on.
I mean, I've heard of Glengarry Glen Ross, but I've not seen it.
Yeah.
And then when he says The Room, I assume he's meaning the Tommy Wiseau movie.
Yes. Not Room, but The Room.
Yeah.
Glengarry Glen Ross is really good. Again, problematic characters, problematic actors, but I do highly recommend. Cube is like a sci-fi prison that's always kind of moving, and each room has a death
Is that
trap.
like Stallone?
No, that's not it. I think you're thinking Escape Plan.
I am.
Yeah, it's kind of similar because they're trying to escape a sci-fi prison. So I get why you kind of mix those two. And then Rope is, I think it's again Jimmy Stewart trying to kind of solve a murder. I think when people are still in the room. I think it's about two. Actually, I think it's about kind of an implied gay couple that've killed a man and they've hidden the body in the room. I think that's the one. Or is that Dial M for Murder? It's one of those. But it's definitely I know it's a Hitchcock. And Time Bandits. I love Time Bandits. I think Time Bandits is great.
My dad loved that film. I haven't seen that film.
My dad named his dog after the dog in that.
Oh, that's cute. I remember it was Time Bandits and Galaxy Quest. They were the two. I think Spaceballs probably is lumped in the trilogy, but I've not seen Spaceballs. But I remember seeing Time Bandits and Galaxy Quest. I know they are different, but they're both those kind of nods to. It's like a sci-fi comedy film for sci-fi nerds, and that's what I quite like. I remember my dad loving those two.
Absolutely. So Dave said The Borrowers, again, playing on the small cast joke. Ha 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 ha. Very funny. Here we go, Mike. Blake's given us more than 5. Typical.
When I saw his, I was like, "Oh, I can't comment from here," because I was like, "His is almost spot on."
Might get some of these. So 12 Angry Men, Memento, Shame with the sex addiction film with Michael Fassbender.
Oh, and Carey Mulligan.
Yes,
I've not seen that.
It's again, that's a hard watch as well.
I imagined.
Good, but a hard watch. Annihilation that you mentioned. Before Sunrise, Moon, My Neighbor Totoro, and Rear Window. Again, another Hitchcock.
Wow, yeah, those are pretty good. Because I did think 12 Angry Men. That was one of the first, but I thought not to put any shade on if your choices or anyone else's, but I was like, there are 12 actors in it. Technically, there's like 14 or 15 because there's like the usher, the judge, and then although there's no speaking roles, the person who's allegedly committed the crime in 12 Angry Men. So for me, I was like, actually. It's really 15 characters. And for me,
only 12 of them are angry.
True. Well, I mean, I'd argue 11 are angry, but it's 12 people, I think, is really the limit. I would probably argue, although, it is quite a small cast because it's just one room.
Yeah.
I think our picks are really 2 or 3 really main characters and like
for the most
maybe
part.
5-ish.
Like I wouldn't
like side characters.
Like I
wouldn't.
I wouldn't include like The Thing. Like I think that's
I didn't want to include the horror films.
Yeah,
because horror I'd say is in itself normally 10 people and they just slowly get killed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think The Thing is probably too many for me. Again, there is no limit for either of us. We've not set an amount. This is just
our own
personal opinion and metrics and measurements. So yeah, 12 Angry, for Blake, 12 Angry Men is a small number, so that's fine. That's down to him.
But I did think about it, to be fair.
No problem. So yeah, that's his choices. Are there any of those other ones you want to mention or talk about at all? Have you seen?
I think some of them come up again.
Yeah.
But we'll go past it.
We'll go past it. Okay. So John Hammond says 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yes, I saw that. Again, all my picks people have basically chosen throughout. So that's why I didn't want to
Mr. Obvious. Mr. Obvious. You're trying to go.
I even tried to choose
going
non-obvious
out of your
things.
way to be Mr. Non-Obvious. I guarantee most people will not have mentioned mine.
I genuinely, when I saw all of yours, Creep is the only one I peripherally had heard of. That was it.
Creep is the only one I'd seen before. I was again going to have Coherence, which I had seen before, but then I was like, right, during this research, I'll just pick something else, and that's where it was come to the 5 and dime. Yeah, it's come back.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, I'm glad. I'm
so
happy I watched that.
Yeah,
I would never have seen that film before for a podcast, to be honest. So I'm really glad.
So Mike Flanagan's Hush as well, which is about the deaf woman played by his wife who there's a kind of a creepy stalker guy with a mask, and she doesn't know she's being stalked because she's deaf. She doesn't hear him.
Didn't you tackle that? No, you mentioned it when you tackled Dead Silence, didn't you?
Yes, I think.
Because I remember you guys talking about it.
Yeah.
So I listened to all your. I haven't listened to your recent pods because I'm in a bit of a backlog.
That's all right.
Hence why I hadn't listened.
I'm catching up on everybody's, mate. Don't worry about it. Misery with Kathy Bates, of course. Which
See, I know the main stuff that happens in that, but I've not seen it fully. And I mean to.
Yeah.
I want to show it to Megan, but
it's one of those films where I knew everything about it kind of going in.
Yeah, I know the main scene and kind of the ending and stuff. So,
but it's still really good. I do.
I want to watch it.
Yeah.
There's a few Stephen King films. Like I've never seen Carrie. Like any.
Mate, Carrie's
and I'm like,
great.
I want to. Well, I've got a little one of those. The good old days where I used to.
I think that'll be a good.
Like
that'll be a good
films.
one with to watch with Megan Carrie. I think. I'd like to hear her thoughts on that, because that's. I think there's a lot of stuff there that maybe hasn't aged well, or you'd be shocked by it. But yeah, I think it still works.
Yeah, there's a little 3 collection DVD thing, which is Carrie something else, and another one.
Stephen King ones.
The Stephen King collection.
Right.
And I was like, oh.
So after Misery, John mentions The Descent.
I'm
seeing that.
I'm going to say some things that are going to really hurt people.
Oh dear.
I think The Descent is genuinely shit. I watched that with my mate Reese, and we were so excited it was around the time we were getting really into horror films. We watched Evil Dead and quite a few other films, Blair Witch Project. And we watched The Descent and we were like, oh, I've heard this is so good. And the first 20 minutes, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. There's a bit where a woman breaks her shin bone and it's gruesome. And I'm like, oh God, this is terrifying. And then they introduce these weird underground gremlin things. And I'm like, oh, fucking hell. And it is so predictable. It's so boring. There are bits where me and Reese were watching it and we went, she's going to look around the corner. There's going to be nothing there. She's going to look back and then something's going to jump down from the ceiling. And literally exactly that happens. Every single scene, Reese and I were just like, this is going to happen, isn't it? And I know that horror films a lot of the time are kind of predictable anyway, but maybe I need to rewatch it or something because I've heard from everyone how good it is, but I just found it all sucked. And then the last scene, you get this big scene where something amazing happens, and then it's like, oh, no, it was a dream. And you're like, oh, come on, every trope. So I, unfortunately, am one of the few people seemingly on planet Earth that not only doesn't like The Descent, but I actually argue it's genuinely not a very good film.
When that came out, I went to see the other version that kind of, like we do these clone bores, which are very similar films coming out at a very similar time, almost the same time, sometimes the same year. I saw The Cave, which is, again, people going down into a cave and there's monsters down there and they kill it. I watched that, and that is genuinely shit. That is genuinely shit.
Okay, right.
Why don't, maybe that's our Clone Wars comparison.
And then maybe we'll
do that, and we'll go, actually, the fucking Descent's so much better than that piece of shit. So yeah, I'll bring The Cave, you bring The Descent, and we'll see what.
I've got The Descent on DVD. I was so sure I was going to like it. I was like, I'm going to love this film. Everyone loves it.
I remember it got the ending got edited in the US, and they were able to make a sequel based on the US ending, I think.
It's Descent too, and it takes place literally moments after the
seconds after. Yeah. I remember hearing about that, but yeah. And then John mentions Creep, which is again
very nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then he has honourable mentions of Cube, You'll Never Find Me. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe I'll Google it now. You'll Never Find Me. Or maybe not. Doing it
maybe
now.
Google just thinks that you're bragging to Google.
Find me. You'll Never Find Me film. It's 2023, so it's quite recent.
It's not one of those. It's not going to be like a Mickey Mouse murder film because John Hammond loves those. He's like the Mickey Mouse one.
He's doing the Popeye one. Yeah, Popeye the Slayer. Man,
it's just
Jesus Christ.
And I spoke to him on one of the posts. I was like, "Are any of these actually good?" He's like, "No, not really."
I like shit, but I think John likes shit on another level in some respects.
Yeah.
So it's called. It says, on a stormy night, Patrick, a seemingly troubled man, is visited by a mysterious woman asking for shelter at his mobile home. As the night unfolds, their anxiety and mutual distrust grow, causing fear and paranoia to engulf the small RV. And then he's mentioned Antichrist, which is a film I'm not entirely looking forward to seeing, but I hear a lot of things about it.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a Lars von Trier, so I think you're looking at kind of Visage Q levels of stuff.
Yeah, I don't really seek out those kind of films.
No, but you'll force Megan to watch them.
Maybe.
And then August Underground, another one I didn't hear of that I've looked up, and it's about a guy who's going around killing people and his mate is filming it on a camcorder. There's 3 of those made. 3. So they must be okay, I guess. Here we go. The man of the hour, Math. Sometimes big isn't always better. That's what I tell Amanda anyway, his partner. Ha 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 ha. He's gone with Buried with Ryan Reynolds in a box. Hard Candy. But yeah, it says 127 hours, you've mentioned, and then The Lighthouse as well.
See, I haven't seen The Lighthouse. I've watched The Witch, and I watched The Northman, which are by, I think it's Robert Eggers, and I think he's doing the Nosferatu film.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so we were going to watch Lighthouse this year for spooky season, but we just didn't get around to it.
I've not seen it either. I hear good things, but I've not.
Yeah, I've heard good things as well.
Dave Horrocks does come back with a 5 after his joke he made. Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, pretty good.
I think it's 12 Angry Men territory.
Yeah, bordering on a bit too many. Fair enough. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I'd argue that's probably a bit too many.
Definitely not.
Characters.
I mean,
Time Bandits, I think there's some wiggle room, but I think Holy Grail's got a fucking load of characters.
Oh, there's loads of people in that. Even though it's only like, it's six actors for the most part. There's actually about 10 supporting actors, and also they all play completely different roles constantly. So, I reject that.
You reject that one. Phone Booth, he mentions.
There we go.
Hellraiser, yeah, it's quite a small cast.
I've not seen any of the Hellraiser movies. Yeah. They always freaked me out as a kid. The aesthetic of them, so I just avoided them until I was an adult.
Yeah, it's. I'd say the first 2 are good. After that, they decline in quality quite rapidly. And then The Thing, which again I said probably maybe a bit too many people for me personally. Again, for me personally, Amphimite personally, but that's up to you guys. It's up to you
and I tried to sidestep horror a bit. Again, I think horror is quite an easy way of doing it.
Yeah, true. I think so too. And Scott Weatherly of the 20th Century Geek says Psycho, A Dark Song, which I think is kind of a folk horror type thing. The Thing, Clue, and The House of Usher, which I imagine that's the newer one or the older one. I'm not sure.
Nothing.
You've got to specify, Scott. You've got to specify. There's multiple adaptations. You've got to specify. Give me a year, man. Give me a year. But Clue, Clue, I think is relatively small. But again, I'm not 100% sure. And then Jack, he says, trying to avoid the number ones I predict you and Mike might pick. I've plumped for. So he's gone for he's got a countdown of how many people are in it. So number 1 is All Is Lost. That's Robert Redford on the boat. 2 people, The Lighthouse. 3 people, Gravity. 4 people, Time Crimes. I've been really meaning to watch Time Crimes. And then 5, The Triangle, which I adore that film. Amazing.
I've got Triangle on DVD. I've got a nice little holographic thing.
It's so good.
It's such an underground, unheard of film.
Underrated.
No one's seen it.
Underrated.
It's really, really good.
Yeah, I know Ria's a fan and Jack's a fan. There's a few other people who I think really like it as well. Yeah, really, really good. So yeah, it's as I said, it's his order of how many people are in it, which I think was a nice way. But he said honourable mention to the underrated Underwater. So that's the Kristen Stewart film with the trapped. It's kind of Alien, but it's underwater basically.
Right.
And they kind of have to escape, but there's these sea creatures trying to get them. And then Super Dummy Paul, random mix from weird corners of my memory. So Pi, which I think is that Darren Aronofsky or Fincher? I think it's one of them. I think Pi.
Could be. I mean, I do quite like Darren Aronofsky. Well, I say I really like Darren Aronofsky, but I actually like 2 of his films and despise one of them. So he's not, and he's made a film called Noah, which I have no interest in. So I don't actually know how good they're going to be.
Run Lola Run, I kind of...
I've not seen that. I've heard really good things.
I'm a bit upset I didn't include that because I really love that one.
Yeah, my brother always tells me I need to watch that film.
But I do have an idea for another top 5 at some point in the future, which I could include that in. Sunshine, which you mentioned. Danny Boyle.
Danny Boyle again. Danny Boyle does a lot of small cast films. Yeah. And I think Sunshine's one of the most underrated horror films there is. And sci-fi.
Yeah, I'm not as big a fan. There's a film I think is very similar to it, which I think I prefer, but I can understand why people would not prefer.
No one's heard of it. People talk about Cillian Murphy being amazing, and I'm like, have you seen? He worked with Danny Boyle being amazing for years before he touched Peaky Blinders. Okay, Sunshine, 28 Days, he's done a few.
True. Safe House from 1998. Again, I'm not really familiar with that one. And The Shining, which I could see what he means.
That's actually quite a clever pick.
Yeah.
To be fair, that's quite a clever. I actually controversially don't like The Shining very much. I think it's so overrated. I watched it when I was a teenager, and I was like, I do not enjoy this. The problem is, again, it got ruined by bloody Simpsons doing The Shinning.
Yeah, true.
So I knew basically the whole plot in about 8 minutes. It's about 2.5 hours or something, and I was like, I don't need to watch this.
It's so good. It's so good.
I think it's so overrated. I'll stand by it. Do you want to know what? I'll defend myself by going, hey, Stephen King doesn't like it, so...
Oh, okay, right. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Not that I'm
enough.
a big fan of Stephen King,
but... so Rhea comes in right at the last minute and says, Ex Machina, Moon, My Neighbor Totoro, and the Blair Witch Project as well.
I think Blair Witch, controversially, I think the sequel called The Blair Witch, not The Blair Witch Project. Because there's Blair Witch Project, which is great. There's Blair Witch Project to the Book of something or other. That's
it's
one of the
not
worst
got
things
nothing,
ever.
nothing to do with it.
But there's a film called The Blair Witch. It's a legacy sequel to the original. It's about the brother of the main character goes missing. I think it's better because I rewatched the Blair Witch Project and Blair Witch a couple of years ago with Megan. The first Blair Witch is good, but the problem is it's so slow and you forget how slow it is. And it takes forever. I think the Blair Witch elevates it beyond levels that people give it credit for. So I'd say any fans of Blair Witch Project, or even if you're not a fan, try the Blair Witch because I genuinely believe it's better. Genuinely. But a great pick.
Yeah, well, that's it. So,
amazing.
Mike, you've already plugged yourself a lot already, but plug away again.
Done a lot of plugs. Love plugging myself. So obviously Disney Discussions is a great way to check out me and Dan. We do regular stuff with Rhea and with Megan, my wife. We do those. It's normally at least 4 a year. We do Disney Discussions.
I'd say minimum. Yeah,
at least 4.
Yeah.
Then we also we've both been on Back to Filmography. I think Rhea's got one coming up as well.
I'm recording one
2.
in a couple of weeks, another one.
Nice, yeah. So we've got those as well, which will be out at some point in the ethereal future. Check out Comics Lit by Tony and Tonya, because many of the friends and family of the Comics in Motion family have been involved in Volume 1. And I know that myself and Dan are potentially going to be involved in future volumes, and there are other members of the Comics in Motion family, so make sure you get on board with that. Support local creators. That's also episode 250 of Genuine Chit Chat just been released, and that is all talking about Comics Lit. Well, the perfect milestone. It's like the 360th release on Genuine Chit Chat because of part 2s and specials and things, but 250th individual episode with 2 of my favorite humans, 2 of my earliest podcasting friends, doing a project which is about the collaboration between other people I care about, talking about why comics are so important and why they should be considered high art. So if you check out that podcast, I'm going to force Dan to put it in the description because I've said it now. Listen to that podcast of everything I've done somewhat recently, because you don't need to have picked up Comics Lit. You don't need to know anything about comics or have any interest in comics, but listening to that podcast will make you passionate. It will make you want to pick up this essay collection, and it will want to make you pick up certain comics and things. So really, that's the big plug, as well as some of my other stuff. Clone Wars Conversations if you're a fan of Star Wars, and also I've done another conversation with someone from the DID system, Douglas Vincent, which is someone with a dissociative identity disorder, formerly called multiple personality disorder, and I talk in depth to an individual of what it's like having multiple personalities, multiple alters within you. First conversation is a big old talk about that in itself. Second conversation is using the MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator Personality Test, and talking with the alters of the Douglas Vincent system and how they use the personality test to best work out the best attributes for how they work within the system. It's a very interesting conversation I've had. So that one, as well as Comics Lit, to the kind of the big hitters that I've had around the time of this release. And find me on social media.
And all the Clone Wars conversations, you've got them all stacked and ready to go, so they'll be...
In Christmas time, December, it's going to be Clone Wars Christmas.
It's
going to be, yeah, exactly. So there's going to be an episode of that every week, and I'm also going to release a few bonus Patreon things on the main feed, and Megan and I will be doing our festive films. So we'll be watching a lot of Christmas films as well.
And you will be back here very shortly for Alternativity Stories.
Yes.
And we're going to be looking at the existential Diana Spencer biopic. I have never seen this, and I'm very interested. It looks very unique, and I'm looking forward to talking to you, Megan, and Rhea about it. It's going to be something a bit different for Alternativity Stories, definitely. But yes, you can find me on spiderdown@secretballs.com. You can find all the links every time I've guested on Mike's podcast as well. Don't forget to check out Mike's Patreon as well, where him and Megan do all sorts of great little reviews and stuff and have their opinions out there. And Spooky Season is one of my favourite bits, and they've just done that. So I've been enjoying all of those and leaving lots of comments from Mike about my feelings on all of those, and going, hey, you were wrong. Here's more information.
That's why they're afterthoughts. I could just
Megan,
it was an afterthought.
Megan hates it. Well, I hate her. There you go. No, that's fine. It was, it's wonderful. I can't wait to hear all your plugging and all the bickering that goes on as well. I want to thank my patrons, actually. I have recently inducted some free memberships to people who have been supporting me recently without paying on the Patreon, and I've decided to gift them as an early Christmas present, a year's membership, and only a year's membership. That's all they're getting, and then they have to join proper. But I'm not going to thank them in this list. I appreciate their support, but you are not paying, so you don't get to be on the thanks list. Sorry, guys. So I want to thank Tony Farina, I Am Jack's Musing, Simon Cotton, Paul Meller, Mike Burton, Angry Andy, Tonya Todd, Math, Scott Hodgson, Rhea Carrigan, and Sarah Coyne. Thank you for your continuing donations. It is very much appreciated and helps Prattle World keep on turning. This has been an especially long podcast, but it's been especially good.
I loved it, as always. We always get together and talk for a long period of time, but thank you so much for letting me come on the show. I appreciate you, and I love all the stuff you do on Patreon, so I will echo the things. Join Spider-Dan on Patreon where you can, support indie creators for people like myself and Dan, and with books like Comic Slip for Tonya and Tony.
Absolutely.
A few pounds can really make a difference. So please consider supporting indie creators where you can, as opposed to maybe giving money to giant conglomerates. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I love Disney. They've got enough money. Okay. Give some to us, please.
And me and Mike are going to team up next year, and we are both going to go. I'll announce it now if we haven't already done it, but we're both going to go to the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival.
Yes, and there might be some other Comics in Motion people potentially going as well, but
absolutely.
I'm definitely in.
Definitely.
I need to buy my tickets.
And we can do some crossover content as well.
We will.
Something on your channel, something on mine, a bit of both. I think we'll have a lot of fun there, and I think you're going to love it, mate. Honestly, I think you will
so excited.
Genuinely love it, and I hope this year, hopefully you'll get there. I'm not on my Billy No Mates again. I
will, and I'll drive as well, so we'll have some sort of transport.
Yeah, we'll sort something out. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well. But yes, I will now depart. I'm keeping you from Megan. I'm keeping you from a night's rest. I've got a lot of editing to do, so I'm going to go now. But thank you guys, and as always, prepare for Prattle.